Chapter 291. Night had passed, and the sky was turning bright. Under Bai Changchun's gaze, Yu Qianzhou had unknowingly sat down cross-legged on the ground. When the first ray of sunlight shone on Obedient Island, Yu Qianzhou's body trembled and he let out a breath. He slowly opened his eyes and revealed a look of joy. Just now, he had unknowingly broken through to the core formation late stage, and he had woken up. Bai Changchun's eyes had unknowingly closed again. When Yu Qianzhou saw the person in the opposite room, he was stunned. He recalled the situation before he fainted and quickly checked his body. His body had already recovered, and his cultivation had also broken through to the core formation late stage. However, the vital essence in his body was extremely lacking, and he did not know why. He did not know how long he had been unconscious for, but the fact that his body was not under his control when he was injured showed that he had definitely been severely injured. For him to be able to recover to this state, it was definitely due to the miraculous effects of the golden bead. What worried him was that with Bai Changchun's cultivation, he would definitely notice the changes in his injuries. He did not know if this would raise Bai Changchun's suspicions. Seeing that Bai Changchun's eyes were still closed, Yu Qianzhou did not believe that with Bai Changchun's cultivation, he would not be able to tell that he had recovered. After thinking about it, he first grabbed a spirit pill and swallowed it. Then, he grabbed a high-grade spirit stone with each hand and absorbed the spiritual qi within. No matter what the outcome was, he had to recover the vital essence in his body first. As for the rest, he would take it one step at a time. After a long time, when his body was full of vital essence, Yu Qianzhou opened his eyes in high spirits. The first thing he did was look at Bai Changchun. The old man was still as indifferent as before. Yu Qianzhou's gaze fell on the large area beside him that was stained with his blood. The blood had already dried and turned black, but it still made his heart ache. He took out a small shovel that he used to plant spirit herbs from his storage bag and scraped up the blood on the ground bit by bit before collecting it into a bag. He could not waste it. This pool of blood might be useless to others, but it was very useful to him. Every member of Utopia's army had a silver number plate on their chest. It contained their blood essence. They had poured half a bowl of blood into it, dipped a brush in it, and added it into the plate. Only then did it become the number plate that the members wore. The reason he did this was naturally so that he could better understand everyone's movements. This was especially so when he dragged Utopia into a fight. He knew every member's position very well. Apart from him, no one else in Utopia knew about this. Not long after, the bag in his hand was filled to the brim. The blood had seeped into the soil, so he had scraped a few layers of the ground. As long as it was soil mixed with his own blood, it was useful to him. It could be used for a long time, and for a long time, he would no longer have to feel heartache and bleed himself. His strange actions finally made Bai Changchun open his eyes, and the person who was watching his every move from the room not far away, Crane Li's gaze was also filled with doubt. What shocked the master and disciple the most was that Yu Qianzhou was able to recover in one night after suffering such heavy injuries. Furthermore, he even had a breakthrough in his cultivation. It was simply unbelievable. Yu Qianzhou focused on scraping the blood off the ground, and the originally flat ground immediately caved in. He weighed the bag in his hand and found that it weighed tens of kilograms. Although most of it was made up of mud, it was imaginable how much blood he had lost to be able to soak so much mud. After sacrificing so much, it was time for him to seek justice. Yu Qianzhou quietly tied up the bag and threw it into his storage bag. He turned to face Bai Changchun and knelt down. I left Obedient Island without permission and was framed. I was tricked by Senior's disciple, Li, otherwise, would not have dared to leave Obedient Island without permission. Senior, please seek justice. He had already made up his mind to kill Li, so he did not leave any leeway. He was not afraid that Li would dare retaliate against him in front of Bai Changchun. Ever since Yu Qianzhou had suddenly returned, Li had sensed that something was wrong. In truth, Bai Changchun and Yu Qianzhou had returned right after each other. Upon seeing his master, He Li immediately said that Yu Qianzhou had fled Obedient Island while he was away. He dared to say this because he had returned to Twilight Valley and discovered that Yu Qianzhou had disappeared. As a result, he concluded that he had been burned to ash by the blue flames. Who could have expected that scoundrel to return right after he reported to his master? Now that he heard Yu Qianzhou say this, He Li was frightened out of his wits. He immediately knelt at Yu Qianzhou's side and kowtowed. "Master, Yu Qianzhou is framing this disciple. It was clearly him who fled while this disciple was gone, but he wants to pin the blame on this disciple." "What? Are you panicking now? Are you afraid? You must be very surprised that I didn't die." Yu Qianzhou teased, "I remember everything you said to me in Twilight Valley, not forgetting a single word. Are you going to tell Senior by yourself, or do you want me to do it for you?" The moment the words Twilight Valley came out, Bai Changchun stared at He Li. He Li indignantly said, "Yu Qianzhou, don't slander me. When did I go with you to Twilight Valley?" He Li wanted nothing more than to tear Yu Qianzhou to pieces on the spot, but he did not dare to do so. He couldn't understand how Yu Qianzhou had managed to escape from Twilight Valley. First, there was the array protecting the blue flames, and then there was the array outside Twilight Valley. 2 ancient arrays. How could he have come out if he could not enter? He had also thought of a terrifying possibility. Bai Changchun and Yu Qianzhou had arrived one after the other, so perhaps Bai Changchun had brought Yu Qianzhou out. However, after Bai Changchun heavily injured Yu Qianzhou, he dispelled this doubt. "Slander me? He Li, there is no grudge between us. If it weren't for the fact that you wanted to take my little life, I wouldn't have been able to find you today. Also." Yu Qianzhou suddenly changed the topic and harshly yelled, "He Li, the personal grudge between you and me is small. After leaving Twilight Valley, I originally wanted to leave, but when I thought about how you vainly attempted to use the power of the demon realm to disturb the mortal world after Senior Bai went to the Eastern Holy Lands, I, Yu Qianzhou, as a member of the mortal world, will risk my life to expose your scheme to Senior Bai. As long as Senior Bai understands, for the sake of the peace of the mortal world, I, Yu Qianzhou, am willing to sacrifice my lowly life to expose your scheme to Senior Bai." His words were spoken with a strong sense of righteousness, and there was a trace of the lofty sentiments of sacrificing himself to protect the Tao. As for what he was thinking, only he himself knew. When he looked at Bai Changchun, he was confident that he would have some sort of reaction, but Bai Changchun remained expressionless the entire time. He simply sat there, listening to the two argue, showing no reaction. This made Yu Qianzhou's little heart a little nervous. "Master, this person is speaking irresponsibly and deliberately driving a wedge between us master and disciple. He definitely doesn't have any good intentions. This disciple is willing to kill such a vile person." He Li hurriedly explained. He had actually wanted to silence Yu Qianzhou by killing him. He knew that he had been too careless at the time, believing that Yu Qianzhou could not escape Twilight Valley, so he had said many things that he should not have. If he had allowed Yu Qianzhou to continue, it would have been impossible for Bai Changchun not to believe him. He Li expectantly stared at Bai Changchun. As long as his master nodded, he would kill him. Yu Qianzhou sneered, "You want to silence me? He Li, you are a smart person. You should know that Senior Bai's divine eyes are like lightning. All deceit and deception are useless. Obediently admit your guilt. That will save me the trouble of exposing your past. Perhaps Senior Bai will spare your life for the sake of our relationship as master and disciple. You must know that there is a good saying in this world, those who confess will be lenient, those who resist will be severely punished. Can't you see that Senior Bai isn't saying anything because he wants to give you one last chance?" Bai Changchun gave Yu Qianzhou a strange glance. He Li, on the other hand, broke out in a cold sweat and yelled, "Yu Qianzhou, shut your mouth. Stop talking nonsense and trying to bewitch people." Chapter 292. Who's spouting nonsense? Yu Qianzhou glared at him. You called Senior by an old fart behind his back. Do you admit it? He Li paled in fright and could no longer kneel. He hurriedly stood up and yelled, Yu Qianzhou, if you keep talking nonsense, don't blame me for being impolite. With the other's provocation, Yu Qianzhou's character from back when he roamed the streets once more appeared. There was nothing to be afraid of in a quarrel, let alone a duel. He stopped kneeling and immediately stood up. He rolled up his sleeves and pulled out his sword. He held the sword in his hand like a machete and waved it twice. He sneered and said, Birdman, you want to fight because you have a guilty conscience, don't you? You don't dare to let me finish? His image as a street scoundrel caused by Changchun's eyes to freeze for a moment. He Li glanced at his master and bit his lip until it was white. In the end, he did not dare to attack, but his entire body trembled in anger. He had lived in the demon region for many years. Although his cultivation was not at the peak, whether it was the Yao King or the Ghost King, no one dared to act so rudely with him. Today, he had finally met his match. Yu Qianzhou seemed to realize that his current appearance was a disgrace and had ruined the righteous image he had just put on. With an embarrassed expression, he sheathed his sword and cupped his hands to Bai Changchun. Senior Bai, that day, He Li told Junior that Senior had gone out and would need 10 some days to return. He also told me that this world had 3 true flames and that Twilight Valley hid one of the 3 true flames, the Azure Flame. He spent all his effort to entice Junior's heart and finally tricked Junior into entering Twilight Valley. Nonsense, it was clearly you who used the roasted fish to trick me into taking you there. He Li's voice was harsh, his 2 hands forming into claws. Gray evil energy curled around his fingertips and seethed with killing intent. At the slightest misstep, he would deliver a fatal blow. To the side, Yu Qianzhou naturally saw and sensed this, and he immediately became cautious on the inside. Why would I lie to a birdman like you? If you didn't tell me about Twilight Valley's hidden blue and that 9 nethers hidden black, who the hell would know that there was some 3 true flames here? I've never even heard of them before. What? Do you really want to kill someone in front of Senior Bai? Yu Qianzhou put on a disdainful look. He turned around and continued to salute. Junior was trapped by He Li in the green fire great array. Only then did I know the cause of the matter from his mouth. He said that the senior wanted to pass the position of torture envoy of the demon ghost region to someone called Mr. Nongzhu, but that Mr. Nongzhu was not willing to take over. Instead, he suggested letting He Li take over. In the end, I happened to come to Obedient Island and lived here as an outsider for the first time. He Li was worried that Senior would pass the position of punishment envoy to me, so he wanted to kill me. The reason was that Senior and I were both humans, while he was a demon. After some insider information that outsiders did not know was revealed, He Li's face turned ashen. He knew that everything was over. His claws returned to normal, and the vicious aura retracted back into his body. He stood there as if he was waiting for death. He was well aware of his master's cultivation. If his master wanted his life, he wouldn't even have a chance to do so. Yu Qianzhou glanced at him and proudly continued, Junior found it strange at the time. With his cultivation, he could have killed me anywhere, so why did he have to go through so much trouble to lure me to Twilight Valley's green fire great array? After asking, I learned that the demon ghost region has been intimidated by a set of spirit treasures, and no battle can escape Senior's discerning eyes. As long as he trapped me in the green fire great array and waited for the green fire great array to erupt, this Junior would die without anyone knowing. Not even Senior would know. At that time, he could just make up a reason for my escape and easily escape responsibility. In truth, to this Junior, a mere core formation cultivator dying in the demon ghost region is nothing. At this point, Yu Qianzhou suddenly revealed a pained expression. He thrust his sword at He Li and yelled, but that birdman was completely deranged. He said that Senior would show some mercy to any human that came to the demon ghost region, but he would be merciless to the Yao ghosts, killing them without mercy. He wanted to vent the anger of the demi-humans and actually wanted to use the power of the demon ghost region to rampage through the human world once he had complete control over the demon ghost region. For this, even if this junior had to escape Twilight Valley, he would risk his life to come here and expose the truth to Senior. As he spoke, he deeply bowed to Bai Changchun. But when he bowed, Bai Changchun did not react for a long time, as if he had never heard him. Yu Qianzhou stood up and saw that Bai Changchun was unperturbed and expressionless. Moreover, he had closed his eyes once more. Crane Li also discovered it, and exchanged a glance with Yu Qianzhou, his enemy. The former's stunned expression revealed a look of joy, while the latter was cursing in his heart. Now that things have reached this point, this disciple admits it all and does not dare to hide anything, nor does he dare to beg for Master's forgiveness. I implore Master to punish me. This disciple will die without complaint. It is just that I have let down Master's many years of guidance. This disciple's heart aches, but it is too late for regrets. In the blink of an eye, He Li had already knelt on the ground with tears streaming down his face, admitting his guilt. Fuck. Was he playing the sympathy card? This birdman could really go act. Damn. He was just about to succeed, so he didn't want to ruin it. Yu Qianzhou's expression twitched, and he immediately knelt down. In order to protect the peace of the human world, Senior has presided over this desolate land for more than 2,000 years. Such a magnificent feat is truly a model for the human cultivation world. If Junior has the chance to return to the human world, he will definitely spread the praises of Senior's deeds and Senior will be revered by all generations. His bootlicking was simply too flattering. He was flattering Bai Changchun, but he was killing He Li. He and He Li had already caused such a ruckus that neither of them would let the other go. The two kneeling there were well aware of this. Yu Qianzhou wanted to flatter Bai Changchun until he had no choice but to kill He Li. Sending two more flattering hats was just a bit of lip service, but leaving behind a future problem would be troublesome. He Li naturally understood, and a hint of resentment flashed through his eyes. He suddenly turned his head and said, Yu Qianzhou, I admit that I tricked you into the blue fire array, but there is one thing I don't understand. The array inside the blue fire array and the array outside Twilight Valley are both ancient arrays. Ordinary people who don't understand the technique cannot enter and leave. How did you escape from inside? Yu Qianzhou's heart chilled. This birdman truly wasn't a good person. He was clearly saying this for Bai Changchun to hear. If he didn't give a good explanation, even if Bai Changchun killed this birdman, it wouldn't end well for him. Fortunately, he had already considered this point and had a countermeasure. As for his invincible escape technique and his life-saving technique, he definitely wouldn't say anything. After a moment of silence, he shook his head and smiled. He Li, do you still remember the murals in Twilight Valley? He Li put on a sincere expression and asked, could the murals in Twilight Valley contain some sort of method to break arrays? That's not right. You were trapped in the blue fire array, so you couldn't have come out and carefully studied the murals. Could it be that you've memorized all the murals on both sides just by passing by? That's not it. Let me ask you, do you know the origins of the woman in the murals? Yu Qianzhou asked with a smile. The two of them continued to exchange questions and answers as if the bickering had never happened. I know. She's the divine craftsman's maid, Little Snow. It's Little Snow, correct? Let me ask you, do you know her origins? He Li suspiciously replied, I don't know. Could it be that her origins are related to your escape? As expected of a smart person. AI. If anyone else had been trapped by you, they would have undoubtedly died, and your scheme would have succeeded. Unfortunately, you ran into me. The will of the heavens wants me to live. Yu Qianzhou looked at He Li and gave a pleased smile. The extreme north has the snow fox race, and Little Snow comes from there. Just like you, I'm a demi-human. After the divine craftsman died, Little Snow returned to the Snow Fox race and passed down a few treasures and arrays that the divine craftsman had refined. Coincidentally, I had a rather good relationship with the Snow Fox race, and the Blue Fire array and the array outside Twilight Valley were also recorded in the Snow Fox race. Coincidentally, I also read about them. I spent some time pondering and managed to escape just like that. Healy, don't you think that the heavens have not forsaken me? Healy stood there in a daze, completely speechless. Even he had run into such a coincidence. Even Bai Changchun's brows twitched, as if this was his first time learning of Little Snow's origins. He opened his eyes, and his gaze swept over the two of them. His lips moved slightly as he spat out an ancient voice, "Are the two of you done arguing? I won't ask who's right or wrong, nor will I say anything else. Only one of you can stay alive on Obedient Island. Do as you see fit." After saying this, he closed his eyes again. What did he mean? The two of them were dumbfounded. They had been quarreling like monkeys for a long time, but this was what Bai Changchun had been holding back for so long. Then what had they been arguing about? He clearly wanted the two of them to fuck. Yu Qianzhou came to his senses and let out a strange cry. The sword in his hand shot at Healy like a bolt of lightning. This was a fight to the death. He naturally had to strike first. Chapter 293. When Healy heard his master's words, he was overjoyed. His cultivation level was clearly higher than Yu Qianzhou's by a large margin. His master's actions were clearly biased towards him. But before he could finish being happy, Yu Qianzhou made the first move. He didn't even greet him and attacked. Yu Qianzhou's actions were considered a sneak attack. But the difference in their cultivation levels was too great. It would have been strange if a sneak attack had succeeded. Healy roared, "Despicable!" At the same time, his fingers formed 5 claws and he waved his hand to deflect the flying sword. The two of them were very close. After the flying sword was deflected, Healy aimed for Yu Qianzhou's shoulder. Yu Qianzhou wasn't an idiot. He knew that the chance of this sword injuring his opponent was very small. When he released the flying sword, he slapped the ground with his other hand. The kneeling person stood up and bounced into the air. The flying sword that was deflected by Healy returned in a blink of an eye and caught Yu Qianzhou. "You feathered animal, you dare to say the word despicable in front of me? Are you done being despicable and I'm not allowed to be despicable? Pfft! I said the wrong thing. How can I be the old man of a feathered animal?" Yu Qianzhou stood in the air and cursed. At the same time, "Xiao Xiao" sounds could be heard. Nearly 100 flying swords flew out from his storage pouch and circled around his body. It was a spectacular sight to behold. Once the flying swords appeared, he could immediately feel that after his cultivation level reached the late stage of core formation, he could control them more freely. To Healy, he felt that this was a battle without any suspense. It was an opportunity given to him by his master. Looking up at Yu Qianzhou, he sneered, "You're the one who asked for it. Don't blame me." His hands formed into claws and slowly lifted up. The vicious energy around his claws reappeared and solidified into something that looked like scales. His hands looked like claws. Evil chi emanated from his claws and revolved around his arms, slowly covering his entire body, forming a faintly discernible membrane on the surface of his body. Yu Qianzhou narrowed his eyes as he looked down. This was the 3rd time he had fought against a master in the middle stage of the Crossing Calamity stage. The first time he caused trouble at supporting Immortal Island's new talent assembly, he was severely injured by Dongfang Chang, AO and fled. The second time was not long ago, when he had a small test with Wu Zhengang. He didn't expect the 3rd time to come so soon. This time was different from the previous 2 times. It would be a fierce battle. Although he didn't know what Bai Changchun's intentions were, he wouldn't give up easily until the last moment. He only had one chance to ride on Bai Changchun's coattails. If he didn't try his best, how would he know the result? Therefore, he wouldn't run away easily. He was destined to fight to the end. Ever since he started cultivating, he had never used his full strength in a battle. Today, he would get what he wanted. After noticing the change in He Li's hands, a thought suddenly flashed in Yu Qianzhou's mind. He had never seen this birdman holding any weapons. His original body was a crane. Could it be that he was used to using his claws? The membrane on his body was naturally his protective aura. He didn't know if his flying swords would be able to break through his aura. Go! Yu Qianzhou opened his eyes and pointed down with the sword-driving art. Among the swords that were dancing around him, 50 flying swords flashed in all directions, drifting erratically around He Li, appearing and disappearing at a speed that was hard to predict with the naked eye. Their speed was extremely fast, quietly approaching the target. Now that his cultivation had increased, he could control flying swords with such ease. It feels so good, this was what Yu Qianzhou was thinking at this moment. He Li was as motionless as a mountain, his eyes darting left and right as he guarded against any sudden attacks from the flying swords. He had never seen someone like Yu Qianzhou who could simultaneously control so many flying swords. However, he didn't panic in the slightest. No matter how mystical Yu Qianzhou's sword control technique was, he was still a core formation cultivator and couldn't pose much of a threat to him. However, he wasn't one to underestimate his opponent. He waited here and didn't move because he wanted to see just how much strength Yu Qianzhou had. After all, the fact that Yu Qianzhou had been able to escape from Twilight Valley meant that he wasn't as simple as he made himself out to be. If that really was the case, he would quickly end this battle. At some point, Bai Changchun was standing under the eaves with his hands behind his back, calmly watching the battle unfold before him. He Li's calmness and vigilance allowed Yu Qianzhou to guess what he was planning. His eyes narrowed, and a glint flashed in his eyes. He took out a stack of yellow talismans from his bag of holding, and with a wave of his left hand, a group of yellow shadows shot toward He Li. He Li glanced up in surprise. He hadn't expected that Yu Qianzhou would be able to control so many flying swords at the same time and still have the time to do something else. He glanced at the flickering cold light around him, and his protective stellar energy surged, rapidly thickening. At this moment, the group of yellow shadows exploded, engulfing He Li in flames. He Li sneered. So it was just a bunch of fire talismans. Did these things really think they could injure him? As the flames spread to the surrounding houses, Bai Changchun's long beard fluttered without any wind, and the flames stopped right in front of the houses. As the flames burned, Yu Qianzhou threw out a stack of talismans in his right hand. A group of yellow shadows rushed into the sea of flames, and immediately after, a series of loud explosions rang out. The entire obedient island could probably feel the tremors. These were the astral breaker talismans, made by Chen Feng. However, these talismans seemed to have some effect on early nascent soul stage cultivators, but not on tribulation stage cultivators. Yu Qianzhou naturally knew this, and the effect he wanted was to confuse the eyes and ears. The astral breaker talismans rang out, and Yu Qianzhou formed a hand seal. Within the sea of flames and smoke below, a cold light flashed continuously, followed by a series of rapid explosions that lasted for a long time. However, after a short while, the explosions gradually faded until there was no more movement. In the air, Yu Qianzhou's expression changed. The 50 flying swords that he had released were all gathered together, and were no longer under his control. What was going on? Not long after, the flames burned out, and the smoke from the astral breaker talismans gradually dissipated. He Li's ferocious smile appeared, and in his hand was a large number of flying swords that were gathered together. These were the flying swords that Yu Qianzhou had released. Yu Qianzhou was shocked. The flying swords were so fast, but they were all caught by He Li. Is that all you've got? He Li sneered. As he spoke, he twisted his hands, and the 50 flying swords that had been tempered by the black gold sand made a zhi-zhi sound. In the blink of an eye, he twisted them into a ball and threw them to the ground. Damn it! What kind of rotten claw is that? It's simply abnormal. Yu Qianzhou's eyelids twitched. Even though he was at a disadvantage in a fight, he still had to take advantage of his words. Then I'll let you know the power of my crane claw. He Li snorted coldly. His figure suddenly disappeared. It was as if he had teleported. He felt that he had figured out Yu Qianzhou's background, so he immediately launched an attack. Yu Qianzhou's pupils shrank. Could it be the teleportation at the end of the crossing calamity? No. He vaguely saw a shadow flickering in the air. It was definitely not teleportation, but because the speed was too fast. Yu Qianzhou immediately felt a fatal threat. With a thought, the surrounding flying swords danced around his body, forming a cold light to protect his body. Dang! A crisp sound was heard. Several flying swords were slapped away. Due to the obstruction of the flying swords, He Li appeared not far away. He drilled through the sword net and stretched out his claws. Yu Qianzhou was shocked. With a thought, the surrounding flying swords turned around and shot towards He Li like a torrential rain. Unfortunately, they collided with He Li's protective aura qi and bounced off. They simply could not break through his protective aura qi. Well, a person who was not good at long-range attacks but good at close-range attacks would certainly have a stronger defense. Yu Qianzhou was chased in the air. He dodged left and right. The bounced flying swords were once again regrouped and continued to attack. Rapid explosions resounded in the air. Although He Li was not afraid of these flying swords, they still hindered his flying speed. He could not catch up to Yu Qianzhou in a short period of time. After a long time, he was naturally annoyed. His hands moved like a phantom. Every flying sword that flew towards him was caught by him. As long as they were caught, Yu Qianzhou would not be able to take them back based on his cultivation. Other than those who were at the end of the crossing tribulation, this was the first time Yu Qianzhou had seen someone who could attack so quickly. His flying swords were already fast enough. But his opponent was actually able to catch them with his bare hands. This was a little too fast. He did not know that He Li was a crane of the demon race. He was most proficient in speed. How could an ordinary person compare to him? Especially his pair of claws. Although he did not use any treasures, his claws were not inferior to treasures. Moreover, they could evolve along with his cultivation. He Li caught 4 or 5 flying swords and threw them away. After a few times, there were not many flying swords left in the air. But Yu Qianzhou had no choice. If he did not use his flying swords, he would be caught. Fuck. When the last few swords in the air were twisted into a dough twist, Yu Qianzhou let out a strange cry. He Li had already shot towards him like lightning. Yu Qianzhou did not dodge. He knew that he could not dodge with his speed. So he jumped down from the flying sword. It looked like he was jumping off a building to his death. The flying sword under his feet played its final role in blocking the enemy. It whistled as it shot towards He Li. Yu Qianzhou shouted as he fell, "Senior Bai, save me." His voice was extremely miserable. Creak. The last sword was sacrificed. He Li laughed evilly and pounced towards Yu Qianzhou. He stretched out his claws and pierced the top of Yu Qianzhou's head. Looking down, he suddenly saw Yu Qianzhou raising his head and looking at him coldly. Yu Qianzhou raised his hand and pointed 2 fingers at his own claw. He was really courting death. Crane Li's smile became even more radiant. His 5 claws fiercely clasped onto the 2 fingers that Yu Qianzhou had pointed at him. If nothing unexpected happened, they would be able to see a badly mutilated scene and miserable screams. But an accident really happened. The moment the fingers and claws intersected, Yu Qianzhou's 2 fingers flashed with a demonic green light. He Li's claws immediately felt a burning pain. The gang qi covering his claws was instantly broken. You don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Yu Qianzhou coldly snorted. He had condensed the highest temperature of his blue flame to unleash this attack. He had spent half a day putting on a show just to wait for Li He's carelessness. In this battle, it was either you die or I live. There was no room for negotiation. Li could not run away. Although the power of the blue flame was huge, but with his opponent's high cultivation, it would be difficult to get close to him. Li could not catch up to him. No matter how powerful the blue flame was, it would be useless if it could not hit him. After witnessing Li's speed, Yu Qianzhou was even more determined to lure the enemy. Only when the enemy was careless, would it be the best opportunity for his blue flame to show its power. And this attack really worked. The green flame shot out from his two fingers instantly broke through Li's earth energy, and directly burned the claw that was reaching out towards him to ashes. Yu Qianzhou would not give him a second chance. Even if he worked hard to lure the enemy, he would not give Li a chance to turn things around. Yeah! Yu Qianzhou roared. Before he could even retract his finger, a burst of vigorous green flame surged out of his body. The incomparably high temperature quickly engulfed Li, who was on top of him. The green flame spun and emitted a hoo-hoo sound. Then, a green pillar of flame soared into the sky and wrapped around Li with an imposing aura that shook everyone's mind. Ah! It's the blue fire. Li let out a blood-curdling scream. When he came to his senses, he twisted his body, but before he could escape, he disappeared within the flames. In the end, he was unable to resist the burning of the blue flames that Yu Qianzhou had used to kill his enemies. Bai Changchun, who was under the eaves, witnessed this scene. His eyes flashed, but he did not say a word. Chapter 294. Yu Qianzhou let out a sigh of relief as the green flame slowly receded back into his body. He was afraid that he would not be able to break through Li's gang qi, so when he pointed his finger, he had condensed almost 1/10 of the fire elements in his body. This was also the limit of his current cultivation. If one day his cultivation was high enough, he would be able to condense all the fire elements in his body into one point. Presumably, the power would be even more astonishing. This was like comparing a piece of burning paper to a piece of burning firewood. After igniting, the paper and firewood may both release flames of the same size, but if you grabbed the burning paper, you might be able to extinguish it. Of course, your hand would be burned. But if you grabbed the burning firewood with your hand, even if you could extinguish it, you would be able to smell the aroma of roasted meat on your palm. From this, it could be seen that as long as you provided more fire elements, the more powerful it would be. This was the same principle as the flames released by Yu Qianzhou. Under the suppression of a flame of the same size, the more fire elements Yu Qianzhou provided, the higher the temperature. That small point contained 1/10 of the fire elements in his body. In addition to the overbearing nature of the green flame, how could Li endure it? The compressed green flame, in addition to the released from his body, instantly forced out nearly 30% of the fire elements in his body. Although a lot of it was recovered in the end, there was still nearly 1/10 of the fire elements in his body. Yu Qianzhou smiled bitterly. If he had not met such a strong opponent, he would not have been so extravagant. If he had to do it a few more times, the fire elements in his body would only be enough for him to use it 10 times at most. Turning around silently, Yu Qianzhou looked at the legendary celestial being. He did not know what would happen next. After all, he had killed Bai Changchun's disciple, and he had comprehended the star flame fire art from the stars. If Bai Changchun comprehended the star flame fire art from the heavenly Tao, Bai Changchun would understand with a single glance. But if it was different, Bai Changchun would naturally question him, especially when he used the azure flame. A core formation cultivator can actually kill a tribulation passing stage cultivator. You do have some skill. No wonder you dared to break into my Shantian island. Bai Changchun stood under the eaves and nodded. He could not see how Li's death affected him. Yu Qianzhou bowed and said, "Senior is overpraising me. I, Li, was careless. I only succeeded by chance. Rumor has it that there is a god of fire in the immortal world, but I have only heard of fire-controlling magic tools in the mortal world. I did not expect that I would be able to broaden my horizons today. There is actually someone who can use his own body as a magic tool, storing fire in his body to be controlled. However, this method of control is a little clumsy, otherwise, Heli would have been defeated by your hands long ago. I don't know which expert taught you this technique. To be able to have such a divine ability, I presume your master is not a nobody in the cultivation world. Can you tell this old man? This old man wants to pay a visit. Bai Changchun said indifferently. Yu Qianzhou smiled bitterly. I won't hide it from you, senior. I have 2 masters, but unfortunately, I didn't inherit their teachings. Currently, all the skills I use are self-created, and I practice them randomly to protect myself. Self-created? Bai Changchun's expression was slightly moved. Anyone who was able to create their own cultivation technique was an outstanding genius, and their achievements were higher than ordinary people. Even Bai Changchun himself was like this. His eyebrows twitched as he asked, since you have a master, why didn't you inherit their teachings? Why don't you tell me? It seemed that this old fellow's Tao was different from his own. Yu Qianzhou speculated to himself. He immediately recounted how he had become on Guangceng's disciple and how he had been abandoned on Fuxian Island. Of course, he only said things that were beneficial to him, and he deleted the unfavorable parts. In short, he described himself as extremely wronged. So that's how it was. Bai Changchun nodded, not expressing any doubt. He then asked, did you use Twilight Valley's azure flame just now? Senior is wise. Heli trapped me in the azure fire array, but he did not know that this junior was like a fish in water. This junior precisely used the azure flame, Yu Qianzhou replied. He also understood that if he wanted to stay in the demon realm, the secret of this fire technique would be exposed sooner or later. It was better to tell the truth to avoid trouble later on. Heli trapped you in the azure flame, but in the end, he died to it. It could be said that the heavenly Tao's cycle of retribution is not pleasant. Bai Changchun calmly gazed at Yu Qianzhou and said, I said before that between you and Heli, only one can stay alive on Obedient Island. Since you have survived and have no master, then stay. Starting from today, I will leave the deficient flame profound fruit to you. Be careful not to make any mistakes, or else I will not forgive you. After saying this, he returned to his room and sat down cross-legged. He then added, repair the damaged ground outside the room. He then closed his eyes. He said all this, not caring whether Yu Qianzhou agreed or not. It was over just like that. Yu Qianzhou froze and then looked at the craters on the ground. These were all caused by his astral-shattering talismans. He did not dare to ask any more questions. First, he collected the flying swords that were twisted by Heli. Although they were already useless, the materials were still there. They could still be used if he refined them again. It was not difficult to level the ground again. He just had to go outside and dig some soil to fill it. Then, he swept the ground and it would be done. Then, he went to the deficient flame profound fruit that was originally under Heli's care. Looking at the fiery red leaves swaying in the wind, Yu Qianzhou suddenly felt a bit of a toothache. This piece of land, in addition to his original land, was enough for him to work hard. But this was not a big deal. The key was that each of these plants needed high-grade spirit stones to grow every day. Yu Qianzhou pinched his chin and was a little unhappy. The old man didn't give him any benefits, nor did he hint that he would pass the position of torture envoy to him in the future. Did he want him to pay spirit stones in advance to help him grow vegetables? Over time, it would not be a small number. Sigh. The old man does not know how to behave. He did not even give me any verbal encouragement. You are ruthless. I admit defeat. Just as he was complaining in his heart, Bai Changchun's voice sounded in his ears, I have already sent a message to the entire demon ghost domain. From today onwards, you are my disciple. You can walk freely in the demon ghost domain, and no one will make things difficult for you. The spirit stones needed to grow the deficient flame profound fruit can be asked from any demon king or ghost king in the demon ghost domain. They will give it to you. Ah. NN. Yu Qianzhou nodded his head in a daze. His face was full of surprise and he could not hide it even if he wanted to. Happiness came too suddenly. The old man looked very boring, but he did not expect him to like to surprise people. Look, he accidentally became the old man's disciple. Wouldn't he be able to do whatever he wanted in the demon ghost domain in the future? Damn! There were many good things in the demon ghost domain. Not bad, very good. Disciple understands. Yu Qianzhou bowed towards the center of the island. He stood up and counted with his fingers. This was already his third master. However, this master was not an ordinary person. The first two masters could not be compared to him. The moment he opened his mouth, he gave Yu Qianzhou an inexhaustible amount of money. Get to work. Without saying a word, Yu Qianzhou took out a pile of spirit stones and busied himself. It did not matter if he paid the capital first. Anyway, someone would reimburse him. His enthusiasm was like the overflowing yellow river, endless. Chapter 295. By Changchun picking Yu Qianzhou to plant the lac flame profound fruit was definitely the wisest choice. The most important thing was that this guy had done this before, so he could directly take up the post without any training. Especially in terms of his work attitude, there was no lack of commendable points. It was not an exaggeration to say that he was immersed in hard work. There were about 200 lac flame profound fruits in the piece of land that he had opened before, but there were about 1,800 left by Healy, so there were about 2,000 in total. Calculating it, he would consume more than 2,000 high-grade spirit stones every day. After calculating, the busy Yu Qianzhou was thinking about when to go to the Ghost King's house to get to know them. 2,000 a day, in a year, it would be more than 700,000 high-grade spirit stones. In the cultivation world, it was enough to support several small sections. Everyone was working under Bai Changchun, so why did he have to pay for it alone? Thinking about how he still had a large number of subordinates to support, and how high the salary he gave to his subordinates, the expenses were huge. Since I am already Bai Changchun's disciple, then what I have is masters. Helping master to support a large number of people is my duty. For the time being, it is better not to tell master. I will help master take care of them secretly and find a suitable opportunity to tell master. After finding a reason to comfort myself, the work was done. Yu Qianzhou cast his gaze outside the Thousand Li Ping Lake. Those demon kings and ghost king who were mingling in master's territory should pay some taxes. What excuse should I use to collect them? Well, I will just say that I am collecting protection fees. Yu Qianzhou was in a good mood and let out a long sigh of relief. Awesome. From today onwards, I can do whatever I want in the demon ghost region. This is something that I did not even dare to think about when I first came here. Thinking back to when I first came here, Meng Yan showed off his power to me. Now I really want to return it to him. Unfortunately, that guy was killed by Bai Changchun. It seems that I can only find an opportunity to show off in front of his widowed wife. Speaking of Yu Ji, at this time, Yu Ji was sitting in the Ghost King's hall with inexplicable surprise. The news of Meng Yan's death really made her sad for a long time. The fate of the two of them for countless years had ended here. Meng Yan, who was dead, could not be with her in the next life, forever. The dead was dead, and the living still had a future to walk. After experiencing the prosperity of the human world and experiencing the tribulation, she became a ghost cultivator for thousands of years. Yu Ji was sad. She thought that without the protection of Meng Yan, she would fall under the crotch of other ghost cultivators, with her appearance. Who knew that Bai Changchun would give her the power of the Ghost King here, which was Ghost Yen, it was a surprise. Yen. Although her cultivation was not very high, as long as she was still in the demon ghost territory, no one dared to disobey Bai Changchun's decree. However, today, Bai Changchun's message surprised her again. Yu Ji was stunned for a long time. He deceived his master and destroyed his ancestors. He committed treason and heresy, and has been executed. Today, I have accepted a new disciple named Yu Qianqiu, and I hope to cooperate with him in the demon ghost territory. She thought she had heard it wrong. Yu Qianqiu? Was it that Yu Qianqiu? That Yu Qianqiu actually became Bai Changchun's disciple? After coming to herself, she immediately confirmed her guess. Who else could Yu Qianqiu be except the Yu Qianqiu who broke into the demon ghost territory and was detained by Bai Changchun? He became Bai Changchun's disciple? He became Bai Changchun's disciple. Yu Ji sat on the throne with an inexplicable expression. She still remembered the oath that Yu Qianqiu made to her in the past. He said that when he had the ability, he would take her and her out of the demon ghost territory. Now that Meng Yan was dead, but she was still alive, then Yu Qianqiu must fulfill the oath that he made in the past. Otherwise, cultivators would suffer the wrath of heaven. Yu Ji's bright eyes sparkled, and there was no doubt that there was a hint of joy in her eyes. She had made a forward-looking investment in the past, just for a possibility. She didn't expect that such a thing would happen. It seemed that there was a high chance that she could leave the demon ghost territory. Under the throne, 2 rows of ghost generals in armor stood in great numbers. The group of generals had suspicious looks on their faces. They all noticed the abnormality of Yu Ji. Sai Zhangfei stepped forward and cupped his fists. "Madam, did something happen?" Hearing this, Yu Ji restrained her emotions, and her expression became solemn. She looked down at the people below, but her heart was in turmoil. "I've had enough of this half-human, half-ghost life. I don't want to be the Ghost King who has power over a region. Whoever wants to be can do it. I only want to be reluctant to part with the world of mortals. I should be among the talented scholars and beautiful women under the waning lights." After a moment of silence, Yu Ji said calmly, "Mr. Yu is now the disciple of the Celestial Master. Pass down my order. If you see Mr. Yu, come and report immediately. I will go and greet him personally." Her tone was very calm, and there was nothing wrong with her words. She had learned a lesson from the death of Meng Yan and Aoli. It was better not to let others know that she wanted to leave the demon ghost territory. Otherwise, there would be consequences. Everyone understood that no one in the demon ghost territory was worthy of the title of Celestial Master other than Bai Changchun. However, the disciple of the Celestial Master made people speculate. In the demon ghost territory, Sai Zhangfei was relatively familiar with Yu Qianqiu. He asked doubtfully, "The Mr. Yu that Madam mentioned is Mr. Yu Qianqiu?" Hearing this, everyone came to a sudden realization, but they also couldn't believe it. Under everyone's doubtful eyes, Yu Ji said with a smile, "Yes, it is Mr. Yu Qianqiu. I just received the message from the Celestial Master." At this time, the Ghost King's hall exploded, and there was a lot of discussion. Sai Zhangfei happily cupped his fists and said, "Yes, I will immediately pass on the order." After saying that, he put his hand on the sword at his waist and dragged his armor out of the Ghost King's hall. Not to mention the people who knew Yu Qianqiu like Yu Ji, the other demon kings and Ghost King in the demon ghost territory became busy after receiving Bai Changchun's message. They sent their subordinates to find out who this Yu Qianqiu was. Some of them even ordered their subordinates to prepare a big gift. Most people knew Li He, but now that he was dead, not many people knew Yu Qianqiu. Since they didn't know him, they had to prepare a gift in advance. In short, after the news spread, the demon ghost territory became completely lively. During the day, demons ran amok, and at night, there were many ghosts. Everything was for the unknown Yuqianchou. The demon ghost domain was a bit chaotic. If Wuxia from the 4 great clans knew about this, he would definitely not find it strange. He had long since come to a conclusion that no matter where Yuqianchou went, there would be some trouble. It would be strange if nothing happened, and Wuxia had already experienced it many times. In fact, it had to be said that the people who were preparing to send the gifts were all very wise people. They did not know that Yuqianchou was already thinking about how to collect protection fees from them. Yuqianchou would definitely be very happy to see the gifts. At this time, Yuqianchou was on the lake of Shuntian Island. His palm was burning with a green flame. He was refining the 100 flying swords destroyed by Li He. The clear water in the lake was just right for the swords. He had to refine them again. With his current cultivation, he still couldn't fly. Without flying swords, he couldn't leave Shuntian Island. He couldn't possibly row a boat or swim. Although Qianfeng had many flying swords in Utopia, they were definitely not as good as these ones that were mixed with mystic gold sand. Furthermore, if he were to collect protection fees and encountered someone who was blind, he could not possibly use Bai Changchun for such a small matter. The better the flying swords, the more useful they were. He wasn't afraid of Bai Changchun finding out. Anyway, Bai Changchun already knew the secret of the green flame, so there was no need to hide it. However, Bai Changchun, who was sitting cross-legged in the room at the center of the island, suddenly opened his eyes when the balls of molten metal were being refined into flying swords skillfully and casually in the green flame on his palm. Bai Changchun, who was sitting cross-legged in the room at the center of the island, suddenly opened his eyes. His soul consciousness quickly moved to the surroundings of Yuqianchou, who was immersed in refining the swords, but the latter was completely unaware of it. After the 100 flying swords were refined, one was returned to the scabbard on his back, and the rest were returned to the storage bag. He originally wanted to go to the Demon King and the Ghost King to collect the fees, but after thinking about it, he felt that he should greet Bai Changchun first. He obediently arrived outside the house where Bai Changchun was sitting, bowed and said, "Master, disciple doesn't have enough spirit stones to plant the black flame profound fruit tomorrow. Can disciple go?" Before he could finish, he was interrupted by Bai Changchun. "I've already told you before, you can ask for spirit stones from any demon king or ghost king in the demon ghost domain. In the future, you don't have to look for me for such matters. You can handle it yourself. In short, you can't lose the black flame profound fruit." Disciple understands, disciple will do it now. Yuqianchou respectfully retreated. After walking a little further, with a chang sound, his sword was unsheathed, turning into a stream of light that carried him far away. Only after flying far away did the respect on Yuqianchou's face turn into a wretched smile. He looked at the demon ghost domain in the distance, which was densely packed with worry. He stepped on the sword, waved his sleeves, put his hands behind his back, and increased his flying speed. He was a little impatient. Chapter 296. Flying out of the 1,000-mile lake, he immediately felt like he was in another world. The sunlight from before was already far behind him, and the dark and strange atmosphere caused the temperature to drop a few degrees. Yuqianchou stood on his sword and stopped in the air, looking around with a strange expression. He was anxious, and didn't know where he had gone. Between the mountains, there was an abundance of vegetation, ancient trees, and wisteria. All kinds of ancient and strange plants were densely packed together. Based on his previous life's logic, it was hard to understand why there was such an abundance of vegetation in this place that never saw the sun. All kinds of strange cries came from all directions, and the strange atmosphere reminded him of the first time he came to the demon ghost region with the various sects for training. At that time, some people wanted to fly in the demon ghost region with their swords, but before they could fly far, they were swallowed by the red light that suddenly appeared. Just thinking about it made him feel uneasy. Although he was here under the name of Bai Changchun, no one here knew him. What if some demon or ghost made a mistake and killed him? Safety first. Yu Qianzhou lowered his flying altitude, and slowly flew about 2 to 3 meters above the ground. He carefully flew through the dark forest. The vegetation that passed by him was clearly lush, but it gave people a feeling of lifelessness, which made him even more careful. After flying for a short while, Yu Qianzhou suddenly stopped. His nostrils flared, and he smelled a rich fragrance. It should be the fragrance of a flower. Could it be that his luck was so good that he encountered some rare spirit grass the moment he arrived? Yu Qianzhou's eyes lit up. His body flashed, and he passed through a gap between the vines. He flew his sword towards the source of the fragrance, and went deeper into the forest. The fragrance became stronger, and the strange noises gradually lessened. Before he saw the spirit grass that he had imagined, he first heard a series of pi pi pa 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 sounds of fighting. That's right, it should be the sound of fighting. Yu Qianzhou was stunned for a moment. He placed his feet on the sword and squatted down gently. He nestled on the sword and slowly flew towards the place where the fight was taking place. The way he flew on the sword was indeed not very pleasing to look at. It felt like he was a thief. After flying for a short distance, a beautiful bright yellow suddenly appeared in front of him. Huge yellow flowers rose from the ground. Just the flowers alone were like huge millstones, and they were as tall as a person. That alluring fragrance was coming from the flowers. Yu Qianzhou was quite shocked. He had never thought that there would be such a large flower in this world. It was simply inconceivable. As expected of the devil domain, there were all sorts of strange things. Peach Blossom, I think you should just follow me. Hee hee. A burst of strange laughter came, followed by a clear woman's laughter and scolding. You dare to have ideas on this fairy. Old Monster Tang, aren't you afraid that Grandma Tang will pull out your root of life? Fairy? Yu Qianzhou's eyes lit up. Could it be that there were beauties here? He was no longer in the mood to appreciate the huge yellow flowers. Instead, he used the big yellow flowers as a cover and moved towards the place where the fight was taking place. After getting close, he hid behind a yellow flower and secretly peeked at the fight not far away with shifty eyes. In a spacious area, green whip shadows and pink flower shadows danced in the air. An old man stood motionless. He was covered with rattan branches, but this was not the strangest thing. Several rattan whips stretched out from his back, making whooshing sounds. His opponent was a pink-clothed woman. Her graceful figure danced in the shadows of the whip, and her slender fingers constantly scattered peach blossoms in front of her to protect her body. Occasionally, she could also shoot branches at her opponent. Damn it! So it was a fight between two fairies. Yu Qianzhou raised his eyebrows disapprovingly, but he still watched patiently. This was the first time he saw fairies fighting. He watched with great interest, but he did not notice that a big yellow flower behind him had quietly turned around. The petals, which were already big, were slowly opening up, facing Yu Qianzhou as if it was opening its bloody mouth. Yu Qianzhou was still hiding behind another yellow flower, peeking with his butt up, completely unaware of the movement behind him. Hard work paid off. After the pink-clothed woman flipped around a few times, Yu Qianzhou finally saw the woman's pretty face. She was wearing a palace dress and her gauze dress fluttered in the wind. She was indeed a beautiful fairy. However, this female fairy did not seem to be a match for the old monster. Every time she released a protective petal, it would be smashed by the old monster's rattan whip. The branches that she shot out were also easily broken by the old monster's extra rattan whip. The two of them were not on the same level at all. The old monster was clearly teasing the demoness with ease, but the demoness was frightened and panting. She was so tired that she was sweating profusely and panting. Peach Blossom, I advise you not to resist pointless. What's wrong with obeying me? The old monster cackled. The rattan vines that stretched out from behind him made him look like a spider in a spider's web. Although the demoness was at her wit's end, she still managed to catch her breath and said with a smile, "If you want me to obey you, that's fine, but I'm not going to be a servant. Old monster Teng, I'll be yours the moment you kill Tengpa. I'm afraid you won't dare. Who doesn't know that you're famous for being afraid of your wife?" As soon as these words came out, the old monster could not laugh anymore. Instead, he felt embarrassed and angry. He shouted, "B*tch, it's your fortune that I like you. Today, you have to obey me even if you don't want to." As he said that, the rattan whip became fiercer and fiercer. The female fairy was already in a precarious situation. A certain person hiding behind the yellow flower finally understood the reason and could not help but snicker. It turned out that even a fairy would find a mistress behind her wife's back. Yu Qianqiu pinched his chin with one hand and considered whether he should go out and save the damsel in distress. As he was pondering, he suddenly cried out, F***ck. A yellow shadow flashed and his vision turned black. He was already trapped inside something. Yu Qianqiu immediately threw a few punches, but with his cultivation, he was unable to break the thing that trapped him. Then, in the darkness, a few more things that were as tough as ropes wrapped around him and tightened around him. There was even one that wrapped around his neck and a stinky liquid sprayed on his body. His strange cry immediately disturbed the two fighting fairies. The two demons temporarily stopped and retreated. They looked at the yellow flower that was wrapped up not far away and saw that it was violently shaking. The female fairy, who was panting, frowned. Just as she took a step forward, she stopped and looked back at the old monster. From the looks of it, it was obvious that he wanted to go over and rescue her, but he was afraid of being ambushed. The old monster snorted coldly and said, "Where did this reckless junior come from? You actually dare to pry into this old man's privacy." As he spoke, a vine whip behind him pierced straight towards the yellow flower. Right at this moment, the yellow flower suddenly exploded with a bang. Rays of sharp, cold light shot out from inside and shot into the sky. The yellow flower was instantly torn into pieces. Pa. F***ck. This is a man-eating flower. Yu Qianqiu jumped out from inside and repeatedly spat out the thing that entered his mouth. He didn't know what it was, but it didn't taste good. Even the gall bladder was almost spat out. He wiped the stinky and slippery liquid off his face. Before he could finish speaking, he saw the vine whip attacking him and stabbing towards his chest. Yu Qianqiu's first reaction was to grab the vine whip that was stabbing towards his chest. The two ends of the whip, one human and one demon, immediately began to fight. How refreshing, it's actually a human late-stage core formation cultivator. Strange. Little child, you actually managed to break into this place. With the old monster's cultivation, he naturally couldn't see through Yu Qianqiu's cultivation. However, as soon as the two sides fought, he immediately felt it. The old monster clicked his tongue and laughed. Legend has it that human flesh is incomparably delicious. This old man has never eaten it before. This time, I'm in luck. Hearing the old monster say this, the female fairy also looked at Yu Qianqiu with a face full of surprise. How could someone break into this place? This was the center of the demon domain. Shameless boasting. A mere mid-stage nascent soul old monster dares to speak such arrogant words. You actually want to eat me? This old man thinks that you're tired of living. Yu Qianqiu sneered. With the vine whip in his hand, the other party saw through his cultivation. Naturally, he also saw through the other party's cultivation. He wasn't even afraid of mid-stage tribulation passing cultivators, so why would he be afraid of a mid-stage nascent soul cultivator? What an insolent child, hee. The old monster looked up to the sky and laughed. The vine whip in Yu Qianqiu's hand suddenly retracted. Yu Qianqiu immediately used all his strength to pull it back. Unfortunately, his cultivation wasn't as high as the old monster's, so he was dragged by the vine whip and slid down the ground, creating a trench. Chapter 297. The old demon was obviously afraid that Yu Qianzhou would let go. The vine whip in his hand suddenly grew longer and wrapped around Yu Qianzhou's wrist. Once it was pulled up, it moved faster and faster. Yu Qianzhou looked at the vine whip wrapped around his wrist and narrowed his eyes. His expression was calm. The old demon laughed wildly. The vine whip behind him covered the sky and wrapped around Yu Qianzhou. Cut! Yu Qianzhou's hands moved with the sword incantation and he let out a fierce shout. The cold lights that had broken through the yellow man-eating flowers and flew towards the horizon immediately flashed back and mercilessly whistled towards the countless vines that stretched out. With a burst of crackling sounds, a pile of vines immediately fell to the ground. Ah! The vine whips were originally connected to the old demon's body. This slash immediately caused the old demon to scream miserably. The vine whips that were mostly broken retracted. The old demon said in horror, "It's a flying sword." Impossible. How can there be so many flying swords? Not only him, but the female demon was also shocked. She had never seen or heard of someone who could control so many flying swords at the same time. They were the rising stars of the demon ghost domain. They lived in the center of the demon ghost domain and had never seen anyone, let alone someone who could control so many flying swords. It should be known that demon ghosts rarely used flying swords. They used all kinds of weapons. Only humans would use flying swords. Not to mention, ordinary people couldn't come to the center of the demon ghost domain. Naturally, the two demons had never seen it before. The flying swords cut through the countless vines and immediately returned to Yu Qianzhou's side. More than 100 flying swords danced around him, and a cold light lingered in this lush greenery. It was a spectacular scene with extraordinary momentum. Yu Qianzhou expressionlessly pulled off the vine that bound his wrist and cut off the connection with the old demon. He coldly snorted and said, "A mere old demon dares to make trouble in front of me. I say, you are tired of living." The old demon, who had suffered a loss, angrily shouted, "Hey! Ignorant junior, how dare you be so arrogant in my demon ghost region? I'll show you how powerful this old man is." With a wave of his hands, the ground shook and countless vines burst out of the ground, crazily sweeping towards Yu Qianzhou. The beautiful face of the female fairy who was watching the battle from the side immediately paled, and she was accidentally wrapped up by the vines that came sweeping over. Yu Qianzhou glanced at her indifferently and did not make any move to save her. He stared at the old monster and sneered, "In your demon domain? You actually dare to say such words in front of me? You've got guts." Even when he was with Bai Changchun, he had never said such words. Now that he heard an old monster say it, he naturally found it funny. Using the finger-driving sword art, a flying sword lifted him a few meters off the ground. The vines that were trying to wrap around him were immediately cut down by the other flying swords. The old monster's formation was indeed frightening. There seemed to be an endless number of vines spreading out from the ground, densely surrounding the open space. They constantly whistled, whipped, and stabbed at Yu Qianzhou from all directions. However, Yu Qianzhou did not panic at all. He crossed his arms in front of his chest and stood a few meters above the ground on his flying sword. He sneered, "Old monster, I want to see if your vines are endless. Today, this old man will cut you down until your vitality is greatly damaged." Among the dancing vines, a cold light flashed like lightning. They were extremely fast. If one came, they would be cut down. If two came, they would be cut down. No matter how many came, the nearly 100 flying swords could deal with them easily. They did not give the vines a chance to get close. Originally, according to Yu Qianzhou's temper, he wanted to burn all the vines with a green fire. However, ever since he modified the Guiyuan sword art, it was the first time he had used it so happily. Finally, his efforts were put to use. Therefore, he suppressed the thought of using the green fire. However, the old monster was in a bit of a predicament. It was not that his cultivation was inferior to Yu Qianzhou's, but the sword art that Yu Qianzhou cultivated was simply his nemesis. No matter how many vines he moved like the wind, Yu Qianzhou's sword moved like lightning and broke through his array of vines with ease. Looking at Yu Qianzhou, who was standing with his arms crossed and had a mocking expression, the old monster felt that he could not take it anymore. If this continued, it would really be as Yu Qianzhou said. He would definitely be cut down until his vitality was greatly damaged. There was no other way. This kid's sword art was his nemesis. The only thing he could do now was to leave first. A trace of resentment flashed across the old monster's face. He said, "Little kid, don't be too proud. This demon domain is not a place for you to be arrogant. This old man has something to do, so I will leave first. I will find you another day to settle the score." With that said, the dense vines in the surroundings all burrowed back into the ground. In a few blinks of an eye, they were all gone. The old demon turned around and scurried into the forest not far behind him. Yu Qianzhou was stunned. He sneered and said, "Old shameless thing. You are really shameless. You can't win, so you run. You even dare to say nice words. I will let you run." With a point of the driving sword art, the flying swords immediately swarmed towards the escaping old monster. The old monster turned his head and was shocked. His 10 fingers immediately turned into 10 thick vine whips to block the flying swords. They quickly tangled with the flying swords. The vine whips formed by his 10 fingers were really powerful. The flying swords actually had a hard time cutting them. However, the old monster was still crying out in pain. Yu Qianzhou flew away on his flying sword. He was too lazy to fight with the old monster. Under his control, the flying swords shot through the gaps between the 10 thick vine whips, focusing on the old monster's body. The vine whips were thick and could be resisted. However, they were also clumsy. They simply could not stop so many flying swords from entering. A few holes immediately appeared on the old monster's body. Thick green liquid flowed out. The old monster screamed again and again. Suddenly, he let out a loud roar and let the flying swords pierce his body. The 10 vine whips in his arms broke off and shot out, knocking away many flying swords. The old monster's aura was very shocking. He fiercely attacked Yu Qianzhou. Yu Qianzhou was shocked. The old monster was going all out. A group of flying swords immediately flashed back to block. The flying sword under his feet flashed and carried him up into the sky to avoid the vine whips. After flashing into the sky, Yu Qianzhou immediately realized something was wrong. He saw that after the old monster forced him away, it had shrunk into a pile. Its head and limbs were all gone. They had all shrunk into its body. Its body had turned into a pile of vines on the ground. Yu Qianzhou swooped down and pointed with his finger. The group of flying swords surged forward and picked up the pile of vines. The old monster had already disappeared. A hole had appeared below. He quickly released his divine sense to investigate and immediately felt a ball of vitality escaping from the hole. Yu Qianzhou quickly glanced at the 10 thick vines on the ground. This old monster was obviously learning from a lizard and cutting off its tail to survive. He, on the other hand, was cutting off his fingers to survive. The old monster could escape underground. Want to run? Not so easy. Yu Qianzhou shouted and pointed with his sword. Dozens of flying swords flew into the hole at lightning speed. Following the guidance of his divine sense, they chased after the old monster. A moment later, a mournful scream came from the hole. Clearly, the old monster had been severely injured again. However, because Yu Qianzhou's cultivation wasn't high enough, the range of his divine sense was limited. In addition, it went too deep into the ground, which more or less affected the release of his divine sense. The flying swords were no longer able to continue chasing after the old monster. "Brat, you will regret this." The old monster's voice was faintly coming from the hole. "Regret?" Yu Qianzhou's face darkened. He raised his hand and called back dozens of flying swords from the hole. Close to 100 cold gleams twined around his body. His expression was indeed a little ugly. "I didn't provoke you, but you provoked me first. How can I let you go?" Yu Qianzhou coldly glanced at the female monster that was still tightly bound by the vines. He pointed with 2 fingers and a few cold gleams shot out, removing the vines on the female monster. After the female monster was freed, she looked around. Suddenly, she was surrounded by dozens of flying swords. Yu Qianzhou floated in the air and said in a deep voice, "Where is the main body of that old monster? Don't tell me you don't know. If you don't want to die, tell me quickly." No matter how far the plants and other spiritual monsters ran, they couldn't run away like animals and other spiritual monsters. They couldn't run away from the ground. This was something Yu Qianzhou knew, so he asked. The beautiful seductress in pink clothes glanced at the rattan that had fallen all around. Her gaze finally fell on the 10 thick rattan that had fallen off. Her bright eyes lit up and she immediately bowed to Yu Qianzhou. "Mister, that rattan monster was severely injured by Mr. It must have returned to its nest under the cliff of the western mountain. This little demon is willing to lead the way for Mr. N." Yu Qianzhou nodded and put away the flying swords that surrounded her. Suddenly, he said, "Wait a moment." He rode his sword and flew to the front of the hundreds of large yellow man-eating flowers. The flying sword that was circling around his body flashed out, and wherever the cold light passed, the man-eating flowers were shot into pieces. What was strange was that when these man-eating flowers were destroyed, they actually let out ear-piercing, jiao-jiao sounds. Yu Qianzhou frowned when he heard this. He waved his hand, and the flying sword flew out again. He only stopped after cutting down all the man-eating flowers from their roots. In the blink of an eye, hundreds of rare man-eating flowers had been completely cut down. He flew back on his sword and said coldly to the female monster, "Lead the way." Chapter 298. The two of them headed west. Yu Qianzhou rode on his sword and followed behind the female demon. That female demon's graceful figure did not touch the ground, only stepping on the grass. She looked light as a feather, but her speed was extremely fast, making Yu Qianzhou feel extremely amazed. She was literally flying on the grass. She seemed even more graceful than flying on grass. Her slender figure, pink clothes, and even her shoes were petite pink. The grass swayed with her feet and carried her far away. Her hair flew in the air and her pink clothes matched the grass. She was very beautiful. Grass elves really had a unique advantage. Yu Qianzhou suddenly asked, "What kind of monster is that old demon?" The female demon replied timidly, "He is an ancient vine spirit that has cultivated for 1,000 years. People around here call him Old Monster Tang." She wasn't a match for the vine monster, and now, the man in front of her could even beat the vine monster into fleeing. He even wanted to chase it to its lair. With this ability, it was naturally not a problem for him to deal with her, so it wasn't strange for her to be afraid. Oh! No wonder he uses vines as weapons. The female demon's words confirmed his guess. He looked at the slender figure and said with interest, "I heard Old Monster Ting call you Peach Blossom. Could you be a peach blossom tree spirit?" The female demon softly said, "Mister's guess is correct. I am a peach blossom tree spirit that has cultivated for 1,000 years. Peach Blossom, you and that old demon have both cultivated for 1,000 years. Why aren't you a match for him?" Yu Qianzhou asked. Although he and I have both cultivated for 1,000 years, he transformed into a human 200 years ago. I just reached the nascent soul stage not long ago and am not good at fighting. Naturally, I am not a match for him. The peach blossom demon replied. Yu Qianzhou nodded slightly. He had heard about this from Bai Suzhen. In the demon race, it was even more difficult for grass and wood spirits to cultivate. Unlike animals, it was extremely difficult for grass and wood spirits to cultivate. Without intelligence, how could grass and wood spirits cultivate? Therefore, it was even more difficult for them to become spirits. In order to reach the stage where they could transform into humans, all demons had to reach the nascent soul stage. Most of the plants would eventually wither and die without being able to gather their spiritual wisdom to cultivate. Even if they could cultivate, it would be difficult for them to transform into a human form even after thousands of years of cultivation. Among human cultivators, even those at the end of the tribulation transcendent stage would die of old age. As the saying goes, where there are gains, there are losses. Although the heavens were unfair, they were actually quite fair. Compared to humans, demons, and ghosts, plant spirits were the most difficult to cultivate. However, as long as they could break through to the deity transformation final stage, it was said that the heavenly tribulations were the weakest, and they would almost always be able to ascend to the immortal realm. Since you can't beat him, why didn't you agree to Monster Teng's request? Yu Qianzhou smiled. If I didn't refuse, I would have died a long time ago, the peach blossom said in a low voice. Yu Qianzhou asked curiously, why is that? His thoughts went astray. Could it be that Monster Teng knew some method to absorb yin to replenish yang? Could it be that he would suck his mating partner dry? How did the two plant demons mate? The peach blossom bit her lip and said, Sir, you should be careful. Monster Teng has a wife called Tengpa. Her cultivation is higher than Monster Teng's. She has reached the nascent soul stage and is the subordinate of the Monster King, Miss Mu. Although she didn't answer him directly, Yu Qianzhou understood. He reckoned that Tengpa was a jealous woman and couldn't tolerate her husband having other women. He thought for a while and asked, what kind of demon is the demon king Madame Mu? Is she the monster king in charge of this place? Miss Mu is a magnolia demon. Her cultivation has reached the tribulation stage. She is the monster king in charge of this place. Oh, Yu Qianzhou said. He thought, why are there only plant spirits here? Looking around, he understood. The plants here were much more exuberant than other places in the demon ghost territory. It was a good place for plant spirits. Speaking of Miss Mu, he thought of the 3 saints of Lingwu who had been killed. One of them, Red Lady, was definitely a coquettish and beautiful demon. He just didn't know what Miss Mu looked like. As he thought about it, an idea flashed in his mind. Don't I have a demon-revealing mirror? I didn't use it before because Bai Suzhen is also a demon. Isn't it suitable in the demon ghost territory? Let's try it. Yu Qianzhou immediately took out the delicate demon-revealing mirror. From the chain on it, it could be seen that this treasure should be hung around the neck. After wearing it around his neck, he looked at the peach blossom in front of him with the mirror. He didn't find anything. After he injected his divine sense into it, he finally found a magical effect. It turned out that he used his divine sense to look through the demon-revealing mirror. The peach blossom seen by his divine sense in the mirror was no longer a graceful woman. A peach tree full of flowers appeared clearly in the demon-revealing mirror. A divine craftsman was indeed a divine craftsman. The things he made were really magical. Yu Qianzhou sighed. After withdrawing his divine sense from the mirror, he felt that the small bronze mirror hanging on his neck was a little ugly. It was no different from the longevity lock hanging on the neck of a secular child. So he stuffed the mirror into the lapel on his chest and injected his divine sense into the peach blossom again. Fortunately, it could still show the original shape of the peach blossom. Good stuff. He touched his chest and found that the demon-revealing mirror was hanging there. Along the way, they constantly encountered some of the largest groups in the demon ghost realm. They were the blood wolves that Yu Qianzhou had seen when he first came here. This kind of fierce animal was not afraid of death. Yu Qianzhou had dealt with them before. He knew that if they attracted companions, although he was not afraid, it would be a troublesome thing. So without saying anything, he killed every wolf he saw. He didn't even give them a chance to make a sound. This action made the peach blossom a little frightened. After coming out of the dense forest, the front suddenly opened up. A few hundred meters away, a tall stone mountain seemed to have been split into two halves. One half was intact, and the other half seemed to have been moved away. Green vines spread everywhere at the foot of the mountain, covering the entire foot of the mountain. Yu Qianzhou pointed to the mountain wall in front of him and asked, "This is the West Mountain cliff you mentioned? Is this the hiding place of the old demon?" "Yes." The peach blossom looked around timidly and said, "Sir, please be careful. If the vine woman is here, it will be troublesome. Tsk. This stone mountain seems to have been split by someone. The power of nature is really amazing. It is not something that can be done by human beings." Yu Qianzhou looked at the smooth stone wall and sighed. He looked like he was looking at the scenery. As for the vine woman, he was not afraid of her. Since she was the subordinate of the demon king who was in charge of this place, she would not dare to do anything to the disciple of Bai Changchun. "Sir, the formation of this stone wall is not the power of nature. It is indeed the work of human beings. It was split by a sword," the peach blossom reminded him softly. Yu Qianzhou immediately opened his mouth and was stunned. This stone wall was probably 700 or 800 meters high and 300 or 400 meters wide. Moreover, it was a mountain of pure stone. Could someone split the whole mountain with a sword? Isn't this too inconceivable? He asked in disbelief. It was split by a sword? That's impossible. Did you see it with your own eyes? I haven't seen it with my own eyes, but this is something that everyone in this area knows. The peach blossom looked around guiltily, bit her lip, and slowly said while looking at the stone wall, "It is said that more than 1,000 years ago, the Blood Wolf clan was the most powerful existence in the Demon Ghost region. At that time, the Blood Wolf Emperor had broken through to the soul formation stage, and he had the largest group in the entire Demon Ghost region. Thus, he was disloyal and did not want to be restrained by the Torture Master. As a result, he fought with the Torture Master here and was killed by the Torture Master. This stone wall was split by the Torture Master's sword during that battle. The other half of the mountain was shattered, and the Blood Wolf Emperor was buried under the rubble. If you remove the green vines all over the field, you will find that it is full of rubble." Yu Qianzhou looked at the half of the stone wall, a little confused. More than 1,000 years ago? At that time, Bai Changchun should have already taken over as the Torture Master of the Demon Ghost region. He swallowed and asked, "That battle, the Torture Master you are talking about is Immortal Master Bai who is now on Shantian Island?" "Yes, Immortal Master Bai. After that battle, I heard that Immortal Master Bai was angered, and then..." The peach blossom seemed to realize that she had said too much. She looked around guiltily and did not dare to continue. However, Yu Qianzhou was eager to know what Bai Changchun did after that, so he urged, "What happened after that? Tell me quickly." He urged, but the peach blossom did not dare to speak. In the end, after being threatened by Yu Qianzhou, she could not help but say, "After that battle, the Torture Master was furious. All the Blood Wolf clan members with a bit of cultivation, more than 400,000 of them, were all killed by the Torture Master in one night. At that time, there was a demon and a ghost in the Demon Ghost region who had also reached the soul formation stage, but because of that incident, they were also implicated. The Torture Master said that they were the ones who started it and wanted the two soul formation stage cultivators to kill themselves to atone for their crimes. Of course, the demon and the ghost refused, so the Torture Master fought the two of them alone and killed them. From then on, except for the Torture Master, there were no other soul formation stage cultivators in the entire Demon Ghost region. Mister, this is all I know. I really don't know anything else. Yu Qianchou stared blankly at the stone wall and nodded his head. So this mountain was Bai Changchun's masterpiece, and it was actually split apart by a single sword strike. His cultivation was just too terrifying. Killing more than 400,000 blood wolves in one night. Ruthless. Ruthless beyond belief. Also, one person killed 2 soul formation stage cultivators at the same time. Those were 2 soul formation stage cultivators. The scene of that battle was so thrilling that it was hard to describe. 1 soul formation stage cultivator killed 2 soul formation stage cultivators at the same time. Wow! He was really powerful and ruthless. No wonder all the demons and ghosts in the demon ghost region trembled in fear at the mention of Bai Changchun's name and didn't even dare to speak loudly. Who would dare to speak loudly in front of such a killing god? No wonder Healy said that he was merciless towards demons and ghosts and killed without mercy. He really wasn't joking. This immortal Master Bai is really amazing, hee. Yu Qianchou squeezed out a smile. After knowing about Bai Changchun's glorious deeds, he was really scared. He only hoped that he didn't see through his little tricks. If he angered this killing god, with his cultivation level, he might not even be able to escape. Chapter 299. However, after thinking about it, he understood Bai Changchun's difficulties. Think about it, in this vast demon realm, demons and ghosts ran amok. If there was no one to restrain them, what would happen? If all these things broke into the human world, then the so-called cultivation world would not be able to stop such a huge force. At that point, the human world would be in chaos. To restrain these demons and ghosts, it would be useless to reason with them. Often, iron and blood methods would be more effective. Bai Changchun was in charge of the demon realm. It seemed that he had killed countless people, but in fact, he had saved more lives. After thinking it through, Yu Qianchou's fear turned into admiration. Think about it, other soul formation stage cultivators did not want to be tied down by anything, but Bai Changchun abandoned his family and ended up being tied down by this demon realm for nearly 2,000 years. His responsibility was great, and his actions were respectable. Yu Qianchou was a little depressed. He had racked his brains to obtain the position of punishment envoy, but once he really took it, the burden on his shoulders would be immense. To put it nicely, he would have to shoulder the welfare of all living beings in the world. Whatever, he would get it first. If it didn't work, he would find someone else to take over. Yu Qianchou thought it through in a blink of an eye. He looked around and asked, Peach Blossom, where is the real body of the old demon hiding? I don't know the specific location, but it must be hidden in the green vines under this stone cliff. Peach Blossom said a little uneasily. I see. Yu Qianchou frowned. The green vines all looked the same. Who knew which one was under it? Without thinking too much, his figure flashed, and he flew above the green vines on his sword. He released his divine sense to check each place. He believed that this old demon who had cultivated for 1,000 years must be a little different from the other green vines. After checking, he was shocked. As Peach Blossom said, there were stones of different sizes under the green vines. It was probably the result of the half of the stone mountain being shattered. The green vines all grew out of the cracks in the stones. Even if he found the hiding place of the old demon, if it didn't come out, he would really have to spend some effort to dig it out. Starting from the place where the two of them were standing, he swept back and forth with his divine sense. After a few rounds, he found something wrong under the stone wall. At this time, the green vines within a radius of tens of meters grew from one tree. It would be strange if they didn't have such a huge branch. Old demon, get out here. Yu Qianchou stared down and shouted. The other flying swords that he had put into the storage bag flew out again and danced around him. However, after calling a few times, there was no response from below. Yu Qianqiu raised his eyebrows. More than a dozen flying swords shot out and slashed at the entangled old vine below. After slashing, he was even more sure that he found the right place. It often took a few slashes to cut off a vine. If it wasn't a demon, ordinary green vines wouldn't be so hard. Alright, you don't want to come out, right? Fine, as long as you don't feel bad, I will cut slowly. Yu Qianqiu chuckled and sent out more than a dozen flying swords. Suddenly, there was a continuous sound of ding-dang-dang-dang. Dozens of flying swords rose and fell and slashed continuously. He was standing in the air watching the show with interest. Suddenly, there was a loud shout from afar. Who is it? How dare you hurt my body? Stop right now. The voice was sharp and anxious. It was a woman's voice. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. Did he make a mistake? The flying swords that were slashing wildly below returned to his side. After a while, a figure quickly flew over. He saw an old woman appear in front of him. She was dressed in hemp clothes and looked old. Her hair was tied up with a few green vines and she held a cane in her hand. Who are you? I have no grievances with you. Why did you hurt my body? The old woman pointed at him and shouted angrily. Peach Blossom, who was standing in the distance, saw the old woman coming and quietly retreated into the forest. Yu Qianqiu looked at the vine that had been chopped into a mess and asked doubtfully, You are Tengpa? Since you know it's me, then you are deliberately looking for trouble. Tengpa held the cane in her hand and was about to attack. Yu Qianqiu hurriedly waved his hand and said, It's a misunderstanding. It's definitely a misunderstanding. I didn't do it on purpose. Old woman, you have to avenge me. At this moment, old Monster Teng appeared out of nowhere. He raised his palms that had lost all 10 fingers and looked pitiful. Yu Qianqiu looked back and his expression sank. He sneered and said, Old thing, not hiding anymore. Tengpo looked at her man's palms and was so angry that her body trembled. You did it? Humph. Old woman, don't be anxious. First, find out who did it. That's right, your man is looking for a concubine outside behind your back. To think that you are still so protective of him. I even brought the victim who was bullied by your husband. Peach Blossom, HM. Peach Blossom. Yu Qianqiu called out a few times but did not respond. He turned his head and looked around. That female demon had already disappeared. She had actually abandoned him and fled. Yu Qianqiu was not angry. Instead, he sneered and said, What a little demon who doesn't know what's good for her. He then pointed at old Monster Teng and Tengpa and said, And you guys, I think you are all tired of living. When Tengpa heard Yu Qianqiu say that her man was looking for a concubine, she immediately turned her gaze to old Monster Teng. However, old Monster Teng's eyes flashed. He shouted, Old woman, what are you hesitating for? Let's work together and kill this little thief. After saying this, he raised his arms. His missing 10 fingers immediately turned into 2 long whips that were as thick as a person's thighs. He ruthlessly smashed them toward Yu Qianqiu, who was standing on his sword. Yu Qianqiu sneered and said, Hee hee. Very good. Very good. He immediately dodged to the side. The 2 long whips missed. With a loud bang, the whips smashed the 2 rocks below him into pieces. Then, he shot up like a snake and swept across the sky at Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu jumped a few meters from the flying sword. The 2 long whips chased after him and brushed past his feet. The flying sword below him circled around and caught Yu Qianqiu again. Yu Qianqiu flicked his hand and pointed. Sword shadows danced and flashed. Almost 100 flying swords shot toward old Monster Teng. Old Monster Teng was shocked and withdrew his 2 whips to protect himself. The 2 whips twisted and flicked wildly, immediately knocking away many flying swords. However, there were still many flying swords that passed through. Old Monster Teng was so frightened that he cried out. He used his 2 whips as crutches and propped himself up into the sky. Teng Po's eyes flashed. No one knew what she was thinking. She saw that her man was being forced into such a state, but she still did not help. Go! Yu Qianqiu lightly shouted with his fingers. The flying swords that were dodged immediately reversed and shot back toward Old Monster Teng. The latter screamed and dodged in the air. Unfortunately, his speed was slowed down by the 2 huge whips in his hands. A few flying swords still nailed into his thighs. Old Monster Teng let out a miserable cry in the air. Separate! Yu Qianqiu lightly sang with his fingers again. The flying swords that were nailed into Old Monster Teng's thighs twisted wildly. They pierced through his thighs and shot in all directions. Old Monster Teng let out another miserable cry. One of his thighs was cut off by the flying swords and fell from the sky. A green liquid exploded from the base of his thighs and slowly dripped down in the air. My leg! Old Monster Teng cried out in sorrow. His arms that had turned into 2 whips went limp. He fell beside Teng Po and supported himself with one leg. He turned around and shouted angrily, "Stupid old woman, do you really want me to die in front of you? Ah! It's coming again." A group of flying swords circled in the air and shot toward him again. Teng Po coldly snorted. After all, this was her man. She finally made her move. She swung the vine staff in her hand, and it crashed into the group of flying swords. Ding ding dang dang, sounds rang out. The flying swords were immediately scattered. Then, the vine staff spun around and whistled toward Yu Qianqiu. As for the remaining few flying swords, Teng Po unhurriedly untied the rattan belt around her waist. She raised her hand and shook it. With a whoosh, it turned into a long whip. Teng Po swung it out like a snake and swept it towards the few flying swords that were shooting at her. Chapter 300. The whip rose into the air like a divine dragon swinging its tail. It was extremely nimble and created several whip shadows that clashed with the flying swords. Dang dang, sounds were heard as the flying swords were immediately deflected away. Yu Qianqiu was startled by the whistling vine staff. The vine staff was like Jiang Zia's god-beating whip. He quickly dodged it with his flying sword. Although he managed to dodge it, the strong wind brought by the vine staff made his clothes flutter. If he was hit by it, he would be smashed down from the sky. The vine staff missed its target, so it rolled and bounced up. It aimed at its target and smashed down again. Yu Qianqiu immediately summoned his flying sword to fight it. Unfortunately, the flying sword could not win at all. The vine staff had probably been refined into a high-grade magic tool. Someone was immediately chased by the vine staff and was forced to run around in the air. Old Monster Teng, who was missing a leg, laughed sinisterly on the ground. A new leg slowly grew out from his broken leg in a very disgusting manner. Although the new leg had grown out, Old Monster Teng's face was a lot paler. This was obviously an action that consumed a lot of yuan qi. Gather! Yu Qianqiu shouted while he was hiding. The scattered flying swords quickly flew over with his 2 fingers as the center. They gathered into the shape of an umbrella and rotated in the air 2 meters away from his fingertips. The vine staff smashed down again. Yu Qianqiu waved his finger and the umbrella sword shield immediately blocked it. Bang! The 2 collided and the sword shield was destroyed on the spot. The vine staff flipped and bounced up. It paused for a moment in the air before smashing down again. Damn! Yu Qianqiu let out a strange cry and pointed with his 2 fingers. The 99 flying swords once again gathered into a sword shield to block. The 2 sides collided and a bang sound was heard again. Thus, a dramatic scene appeared in the air. One kept smashing down from all angles, while the other kept blocking from all angles. Immediately, Yu Qianqiu found himself in a very difficult situation. His two fingers continuously gathered the shattered flying swords and used them as shields. He blocked left and right in the air, blocking in all directions. Fortunately, the two demons had not reached the tribulation stage yet. Otherwise, Yu Qianzhou would not have been able to withstand the opponent's attacks. Resisting head-on in the air like this caused his true essence to be rapidly consumed. Yu Qianzhou hurriedly took out a few qi-returning pills and placed them in his mouth like he was chewing beans, swallowing them dry to recover his true essence. His face became more and more gloomy, and from time to time, two jumping green flames flashed in his eyes. It was just that he couldn't see it. He probably wanted to use the green flames that he had been suppressing. It seemed that he had to put aside the idea of practicing the imperial sword technique. I didn't expect a core formation cultivator to be able to use the sword control technique so skillfully. Tengpo looked at the sky and couldn't help but praise. For a core formation cultivator to be able to resist the combined attacks of two nascent soul cultivators was already quite impressive. She then turned around and asked, "Old man, who is this young man? How did he get here? Who the hell knows who he is? I don't care so much. Let's kill him and take revenge first." Old Monster Teng said with a sinister expression. On the treetop of a nearby forest stood a woman in a pink dress. Her hair was tied up in a high bun, and her face was cold and beautiful. She appeared exceptionally noble. Behind her stood two women in pink clothes of the same color, but the two of them were far inferior to the former in terms of temperament. The three women silently stood on the treetop and watched the battle not far away. The hem of their dresses fluttered in the wind. Who is this young man? How did he get here? The woman with the noble temperament suddenly asked the same question as Tengpa. The woman on her right replied, "Lady, I don't know either." Tengpa suddenly felt that someone was destroying her body, so she hurried over. Tengpa didn't say anything else. The noble woman frowned and said, "That's strange. That young man seems to be having a hard time fighting. His cultivation is only at core formation. A mere core formation cultivator wouldn't even be able to enter the outskirts of the demon realm. How did he get here?" The woman on the left was confused and said, "That's right. This place isn't far from the 1,000-mile lake. Could he be from Obedient Island? Could he be the disciple of the torture envoy?" Her words were just a casual guess, but the expressions of the other two people changed drastically. The woman on the right shook her head and said, "That's impossible. The cultivation of that torture envoy is unfathomable. How could his disciple be so useless? Didn't that Heli also have the cultivation of the middle stage of passing calamity?" The noble woman's expression softened and she nodded and said, "That's right. No matter how useless the torture envoy's disciple is, his cultivation shouldn't be so weak. If Yu Qianzhou heard someone say this about him, he would definitely vomit blood in anger. Fortunately, he didn't hear it. He was fighting fiercely in the air, and the more he fought, the angrier he became. The two of them attacked him together, and he didn't even have a chance to fight back. He was constantly being suppressed. If Tengpo attacked him with her whip again, he wouldn't have been able to resist it. Finally, he couldn't play anymore. The feeling of being suppressed by someone else was very uncomfortable. His eyes were suffused with a penetrating green light, and two green flames were clearly lit up. The sword shield protecting Yu Qianzhou had just been destroyed by Tengpo's cane when a claw glowing with a demonic green light quickly passed through the flying swords and grabbed the cane, which had exhausted its momentum and was about to return to attack again. At the same time, he stretched out two fingers with his other hand, and the shattered flying swords quickly condensed and blocked Curmudgeon Teng's whip. As soon as the sword shield was destroyed, 5 claws glowing with a demonic green light immediately reached out and grabbed the tail of the cane in the same way. The flying sword completed its task, and with a swish, it turned into a cold light and flashed into Yu Qianzhou's storage bag. The moment the cane whip was grabbed by Yu Qianzhou, Curmudgeon Teng on the other end of the cane cried out, "It's scalding me, it's scalding me." Let go, little boy." His expression twitched as he swung his arm, which had turned into a cane whip. Finally, he couldn't stand it anymore, and he gritted his teeth, leaving a long tail of the cane in Yu Qianzhou's hand, just like the last time he broke his fingers. Teng Po looked at her old man in surprise, who was jumping around and peeing, and then looked at Yu Qianzhou. The moment her cane was grabbed by Yu Qianzhou, the divine sense attached to it instantly disappeared, and she completely lost contact with the cane. Yu Qianzhou floated in the air, and the things in his hands suddenly ignited with a blue flame. When the flame was extinguished, the things in his hands turned to ashes and were blown away by the wind. The sudden appearance of the two blue flames surprised everyone nearby and in the distance. But what surprised them even more was, a smile appeared at the corner of Yu Qianzhou's mouth. As a disciple of Bai Changchun, someone actually dared to beat him up in the demon ghost region. The more he thought about it, the more he found it interesting. In the end, he couldn't help but laugh and say, "I didn't expect that I, Yu Qianzhou, would receive such a warm welcome from you two when I first arrived here. How can I repay you?" Huh. Chapter 301. He might not have felt anything when he said that, but to the others, it was no less than a bolt from the blue. It was enough to make them lose their minds. Yu Qianzhou's voice was not soft. The woman who stood on the treetop like a noble empress clearly heard it, but she still could not believe it. She asked in a trembling voice, "What did he say his name was?" The two women behind her turned pale. Their eyes lost focus as they mumbled weakly, "Yu Qianzhou. He's Yu Qianzhou, the disciple of the disciplinary envoy." Instantly, the noble woman's face turned ashen, and she lost all her temperament. "You're Yu Qianzhou?" Teng Po's face was filled with terror. "Who cares what his name is? He won't be leaving here alive today. Don't show any mercy, old woman. Kill him." Old freak Teng did not learn his lesson after suffering a loss. Seeing that Yu Qianzhou had already put away his flying sword, he swung his two whips with a ferocious expression and lashed at the air. "No, stop," a few screams rang out at the same time. Unfortunately, old freak Teng had already made his move. The disciple of the disciplinary envoy had already announced his name, but someone still dared to make a move. Wasn't this a death wish? It was fine if old freak Teng was courting death, but according to the disciplinary envoy's temper, everyone present would probably be implicated. No one would be able to escape. Teng Po was completely flustered. The three women on the treetop were confused. The four women's minds were blank. They looked on dumbly and forgot to stop old freak Teng. As the vine whips approached, Yu Qianzhou narrowed his eyes. Green flames surged around his body, illuminating the gloomy sky with a dazzling green brilliance. There was a person standing in the middle of the green flames. It was a very strange scene. Teng Po and the three women were dumbstruck, and their hearts surged with boundless sorrow. They all asked themselves, how could the punishment envoy's disciple be an ordinary person? Old freak Teng was shocked to see the strange condition on Yu Qianzhou's body. In addition to that, he heard Grandma Teng's cries from afar. He had a bad feeling about this. He was just about to pull back his whips when he saw Yu Qianzhou shoot out two balls of azure flames. In a moment of desperation, he retracted his whip to protect himself, wanting to deflect the incoming flames. Who would have thought that as soon as the two whips touched the two balls of green flames, it was as if the whips had been doused with kerosene. The green flames quickly spread from the tips of the whips all the way down, turning the two whips into ashes. Ah! Old Monster Teng let out a blood-curdling scream. How could the vine whip, which was connected to his body, withstand the pain of the azure fire? However, he hardened his heart. Before the fire reached him, his arms, which had transformed into two whips, once again broke off to protect himself. After losing his limbs several times, old Monster Teng's essence was greatly damaged. He trembled in pain as he said, "Old woman, my essence is too exhausted. I can't attack anymore. Help me kill him. Shut up. Tengpa shook her head miserably. Her face was filled with pain as the whip in her hand fell to the ground. Speechless, she knelt before Yu Qianzhou. Old woman, you. Old Monster Ting finally realized that something was wrong. He looked at Yu Qianzhou in horror, then at Tengpa. When the cries rang out, Yu Qianzhou immediately noticed the three people on the treetop. From the actions of Tengpa and the others, he could tell that his identity was no longer a secret. Yu Qianzhou withdrew the flames around his body and coldly glanced at the forest. He snorted and said, "Do you still need me to invite you over?" The three figures quickly flew over and knelt down as soon as they landed. The woman leading them said in fear and trepidation, "Lady Mu greets Mr. We did not know that Mr. was here. Please forgive us." "Greetings, Yao Monarch." When the woman leading them arrived, Old Monster Ting immediately knelt down and kowtowed. However, he did not expect that the person he was kowtowing to was his enemy. He was stunned. Tengpa, who was kneeling beside him, began to weep softly. The three women's cultivation levels were not low. From the moment they arrived to the moment they knelt down, they were so fast that Yu Qianzhou did not manage to see their faces clearly. This made Yu Qianzhou, who originally wanted to see if the three women were beautiful, a little depressed. He could only put away the flying sword beneath his feet and descend to the ground. He said in a deep voice, "The three of you, get up." He did not ask Old Monster Ting or Tengpa to get up. After the three of them got up, they did not dare to raise their heads to look at him. Yu Qianzhou could only say again, "You are the Yao Monarch, Lady Mu? I want to see you. The three of you, raise your heads. This little demon is indeed Lady Mu." Lady Mu bowed. She did not dare to call herself a Yao Monarch in front of Yu Qianzhou. The three women slowly raised their heads. Their panicked eyes also took the opportunity to observe Yu Qianzhou. Her temperament was good, and she could be considered beautiful. Unfortunately, she could not compare to Bai Suzhen. Her figure was not great either, and she could not compare to Wu Lixue and the Temptress of 100 Charms. After looking at the three of them, Yu Qianzhou came to this conclusion. However, this feeling of raising one's head as a Yao Monarch in the final stages of the Tribulation Transcendence was not bad. If he dared to say such words in the outside world, he would definitely be hunted down. Yu Qianzhou looked at Old Monster Ting and Tengpa with slight disappointment. His gaze gradually turned cold. It was time to settle the score with these two. He slowly walked in front of the two and said coldly, "Old Monster Ting, have I seen you before?" Old Monster Ting shivered and said fearfully, "No, no." "Then, have I offended you before?" "No." "Since I have never seen you before and have never offended you, why did you want to kill me when I saw you fighting with that peach blossom spirit?" "I was confused. I was confused for a moment. I didn't know it was Mr. Please forgive me, Mr. Old Monster Ting kowtowed repeatedly. In fact, he still did not know who this Yu Qianzhou was. However, the actions of Lady Mu and the others were very clear. He could only blame himself for being obsessed with that peach blossom spirit for the past few days. He did not even pay attention to the most important matters in the demon domain. Lady Mu and the others stared at him in unison. So, it was this guy who had caused all this trouble. But of all people, he had to provoke Bai Changchun's disciple. Wasn't this the same as dragging everyone to die with him? One could imagine the expressions of the women at the moment. "I didn't provoke you. You provoked me first. I'm not wrongly accusing you, am I?" Yu Qianzhou's tone became gloomy. His eyes shone with a green light, causing Lady Mu and the others to shudder. "No." Old Monster Ting replied weakly. Then, he continued to kowtow and beg for mercy. Yu Qianzhou's green eyes turned to Tengpa. He snorted coldly and said, "I have just cultivated a set of sword kinesis techniques. Since I met you two, I can use it to practice. Do you two think that I am no match for you? We don't dare. No. The two of them kowtowed in unison. Yu Qianzhou did not care whether the two of them were telling the truth or not. He stretched out his palm and a ball of green flames burst out. A powerful heat suddenly spread in all directions. The two of them immediately sat on the ground, feeling suffocated. Lady Mu and the others could not help but take a few steps back in shock. Their expressions were uncertain. They all had the same thought. What a powerful flame! Even with their cultivation at the end of the tribulation stage, they could not get close to it. If I wanted to kill you too, it would be as easy as flipping my hand. Yu Qianzhou said indifferently as he held the ball of green flames. This time, the two of them really believed him. Old Monster Teng shook his head with a pained expression. He withstood the irresistible heat and knelt down with great difficulty. He kowtowed and said, "Mister, this matter was caused by me alone. It has nothing to do with Tengpa. This lowly demon is willing to die as an apology. I beg Mister to spare Tengpa." Old man. Tengpo looked at old Monster Teng and cried out in relief. Her man was willing to sacrifice his life to save her at the most critical moment. All of the previous unhappiness instantly disappeared. Old Monster Teng was still kowtowing and begging for mercy. It's too late. Yu Qianzhou lightly spat out these two words. He turned his hand around and clenched his fist. Wang! The green flames surged and instantly engulfed the two of them. In that instant, Tengpa suddenly threw herself onto old Monster Teng, who was still kowtowing. It was as if she wanted to block the flames for her man. However, all she got in return were two miserable screams. As Yu Qianzhou indifferently sucked the green flames back into his palm, two piles of ashes appeared on the ground. A gust of wind blew them up and they swirled away. Lady Mu and the other two's pupils shrank. They were shocked by the tyrannical power of the green flames. It had actually burned Tengpa and old Monster Teng to ashes in an instant, who said that plants were heartless. Yu Qianzhou stood with his hands behind his back and watched the ashes float away. Then, he swept his gaze over the green vines and coldly snorted. I originally wanted to eradicate the two of you, but seeing that you two were so sentimental before you died. Humph. I'll let you two be ignorant plants and let the green vines entangle you until you wither. That's me being merciful. Lady Mu. Yu Qianzhou slowly turned around and said, "There's a peach blossom tree demon. Please capture him for me. I want him alive." Chapter 302. It was a large wooden house built against the mountain. It looked like a bandit's stronghold, and it was very old. In the middle of the house, there was a gurgling stream. This is the place where the ruler of this area, the demon king Lady Mu, lives? Yu Qianzhou couldn't believe it at first. He had never seen the other ghost king of the demon ghost domain, but he had seen Meng Yan's underground palace. That imposing manner was like that of a local tyrant. This demon king is a little too simple. Could it be that he knows that I'm coming to collect protection fees, so he deliberately made it like this? Damn it, I don't even know how to open my mouth. After Lady Mu confirmed it again and again, he reluctantly believed it. After entering the stronghold, magnolia trees could be seen everywhere. Blooming magnolia were dotted among the green leaves, exuding a fragrance. Along the way, they didn't see many people, and most of them were women. You only have these few subordinates? Yu Qianzhou asked as they walked. Lady Mu, who accompanied him and led the way, replied, "Mister, you may not know this, but the spirits of plants are not like the spirits of animals. It's not suitable for them to leave their bodies for a long time. Usually, I only summon them when there's something. I'm being silly. I'll summon them immediately to greet Mister. That's not what I meant. There's no need to go through so much trouble. Yu Qianzhou acted like a leader inspecting his work. He waved his hand, suddenly pulled his collar and sniffed, saying, "I was sprayed by the man-eating flowers. Do you have a place to take a bath?" "Yes." Lady Mu asked, "Mister, do you want to use a clear spring or a hot spring?" "You have a hot spring here?" "Huh, then let's use a hot spring." As soon as Yu Qianzhou finished speaking, Lady Mu immediately whispered to him, probably arranging for someone to prepare it. After a while, the two came to the largest main hall in the stronghold. It was probably the place where Lady Mu was in charge. The simple and exquisite decoration and the thick pink velvet carpet all reflected a woman's taste. Madame Mu stretched out her hand to lead the way. "Mister, please follow me." Yu Qianzhou nodded his head and followed her out of the back hall. The scene in front of him suddenly became a little more elegant. There was a meandering stream and a few small wooden bridges across it. It gave off the feeling of a small bridge, flowing water and people's houses. Magnolia trees were scattered among them. It was impossible to tell that this was the residence of a demon king. The two of them walked to the front of a cave. The arched semi-oval cave entrance was carved with intricate patterns, all of which were magnolia blooming in various postures. Miss Mu pulled up the pink gauze hanging at the entrance of the cave and said, "This is the place for bathing. The conditions are poor, but this is the only place in the entire village that is slightly better. Please don't take offense." Yu Qianzhou looked at the pink gauze she had pulled up and asked with a strange expression, "Is this where you take a bath?" Lady Mu nodded her head calmly. She had no choice. The other places were even more crude, and the place she used was the best. Therefore, she had no choice but to bring Yu Qianzhou there. Yu Qianzhou didn't say anything and walked in. A 3-meter-wide bathing pool was in the middle of the stone room. After 2 water infusion troughs from different directions met, water was poured into the pool with a goo-goo sound. With a little effort, one could tell that one of the troughs was from a hot spring, while the other was from a clear spring. Presumably, the temperature had been adjusted according to the flow of water. The bright green pool water was slightly steaming, which was very tempting. Yu Qianzhou couldn't wait to take off his clothes. Suddenly, he remembered that Miss Mu was still by his side. He turned around and tugged at his clothes, saying with a smile, "Then I won't stand on ceremony." He signaled for Miss Mu to leave. "I'm going to take a bath." Unexpectedly, Miss Mu nodded and said, "I'll help you take a bath." After saying that, she stretched out her hand to help Yu Qianzhou take off his clothes. Yu Qianzhou was stunned. He immediately waved his hand and said, "Miss Mu, you've misunderstood me. That's not what I meant. How could I dare to trouble the Demon King to serve me? You should call 2 servants." Although he was embarrassed to take advantage of Miss Mu, he could still get 2 other women to serve him. That was what he meant. "No problem. It's my good fortune to be able to help you take a bath." As Miss Mu spoke, she stretched out her hand again. Yu Qianzhou pretended to decline her offer. Under the circumstances where it was difficult to refuse, he was stripped naked and went into the water naked. The water temperature was just right. Yu Qianzhou lay comfortably in the pool and let out a moan. He rested his head on his pillow and closed his eyes to enjoy the feeling. Suddenly, he heard the sound of water splashing. When he opened his eyes, he saw that Miss Mu had also stripped herself naked. Her naked body was exposed. 3 words immediately appeared in Yu Qianzhou's mind: lover's bath. She wants to seduce me. This was his next thought. However, when he looked at the expression on Miss Mu's face, he found that she was calm and her eyes were calm. After she leaned over, she did not make any other pretentious movements. Her slender fingers lifted his feet and began to massage his feet. Moreover, her technique was very professional. It seemed that she often did this kind of thing. Yu Qianzhou found it strange. How could a dignified demon king do this often? He couldn't help but ask, "Miss Mu, how did you become so skilled?" Miss Mu smiled and said, "You may not know this, but I served the previous demon king for more than 300 years. Of course, I'm skilled." "Oh," Yu Qianzhou said, then closed his eyes to enjoy it again. Since Miss Mu herself did not care, he did not care either. At first, he still had some perverted thoughts, but they were replaced by the comfortable kneading and moving fingertips. Speaking of which, he still had a certain immunity to beautiful women. The key was that the women he had were all top-notch goods. They had good figures and looks. With Miss Mu's physical condition, she really did not have much attraction for him. The strength of her fingertips was just right. They wandered around every part of his body. After a while, Yu Qianzhou actually fell asleep comfortably. He did not know how long he had slept, but suddenly he was gently woken up. Miss Mu said softly, "Sir, the peach blossom demon has been caught, and the ghost king, Yu Yan, who is in charge of the local area, is also waiting to see you in the main hall." Yu Qianzhou's sleepy eyes immediately became clear. He climbed out of the water without hesitation and said, "Let's go and see." Miss Mu followed him out of the water. She took a cotton towel from somewhere and helped him wipe his body. The former enjoyed it calmly. His thinking was very simple. Since it was already like this, there was no need to worry about the two of them being willing. Yu Qianzhou summoned a new set of clothes out of thin air. Miss Mu was slightly stunned when she saw it, but immediately helped him put it on. She also quickly put on her clothes. "Your technique is very good, the massage is very comfortable." On the way to the main hall, Yu Qianzhou suddenly said with a smile, "How many people could enjoy having a bath with a demon king at the end of the crossing calamity stage and having him give him a massage? Just thinking about it made him feel good. It is my blessing to be able to serve Sir. If Sir likes it, you can come often. I can't ask for more." Miss Mu also smiled. If she could have a good relationship with Bai Changchun's disciple, there was naturally no need to mention the benefits in the future. I'm really afraid that I can't help but come often. I can't ask for more." The two of them went to the main hall with smiles on their faces. As soon as they came in, Yu Qianzhou's face darkened. He saw the peach blossom demon kneeling there. A beautiful woman wrapped in green muslin in the hall saw that Yu Qianzhou's expression was not good. She stole a glance at Miss Mu, who smiled slightly. She immediately knelt down and said, "Yu Yan pays respect to Sir." Yu Qianzhou glanced at her coldly and raised his hand to signal her to get up. He walked straight to Peach Blossom and sneered, "Peach Blossom, do you still recognize me?" How could Peach Blossom not recognize him? She did not know why she was caught and brought here. She was in a panic. Now that she saw him walking out with the Demon King and the Ghost King kneeling down to greet him, she immediately realized that she had made a big mistake. She knelt down and kowtowed repeatedly, "I know I was wrong, I know I was wrong, I saved you, but you left me and ran away secretly. Hey, I hate ungrateful people the most in my life. Get up. It's useless to bow again." Yu Qianzhou stared at her and said. Peach Blossom hugged his leg and begged bitterly, "Sir, forgive me this time. I won't dare to do it again. I asked you to get up, didn't you hear me?" Yu Qianzhou's voice was very cold. Peach Blossom stood up shakily. Tears were already flowing down her face. She shook her head and cried, "I've been cultivating for thousands of years. I transformed into a human form and was alone. I didn't know Sir's ability at that time. When I saw Tengpe, I was really scared." Her voice stopped abruptly. Yu Qianzhou suddenly poked her chest with both hands. Peach Blossom opened her mouth wide and her eyes bulged. Soon, her eyes shrunk deeply, and smoke began to come out of her 7 orifices. Then, the skin all over her body rapidly shrank. Suddenly, a blue flame emerged from her body, and she disappeared without a trace in an instant. You have eyes but failed to see the situation clearly. Since you can't see the situation clearly, why do you still transform into a human form and continue to be a 1,000-year-old peach tree? Yu Qianzhou opened his 5 fingers indifferently and sucked the blue flame back into his palm. Chapter 303. The thick pink carpet was not damaged at all, but there was a pile of ashes. It was hard to believe that such a powerful flame could burn on the carpet without burning it. It could be seen that Yu Qianzhou's ability to control flames had reached an exquisite level. Only Yu Qianzhou himself knew the secret. It was said that playing with fire would cause one to be burned, but he was able to control it freely. The Demon King, Miss Mu, was a little better. She had already seen the fate of Tengpe and her husband. But the Ghost King, Yu Yan, was a little creeped out. Yu Qianzhou had turned the demoness into ashes with a gentle point of his finger. She thought that she could easily kill the demoness, but it was absolutely impossible for her to turn a person's bones into ashes with a flick of her finger. In particular, the aura emitted by the blue flame was extremely young. Without even trying, she already knew that it could restrain her. The disciple of the torturer was indeed extraordinary. The way he killed without batting an eye was very similar to the style of a torturer. Yu Yan looked at Yu Qianzhou with more and more respect. Yu Qianzhou glanced at Yu Yan, who was standing with her hands behind her back. Although he hated ungrateful people, but to kill a peach blossom here was more or less like killing the chicken to warn the monkey. He wanted to show the female Ghost King that he, the disciple of the torture envoy, was not someone to be trifled with. He walked unceremoniously to the chair in the middle of the main hall and sat down. Looking at the 2 people standing below, he said, "Since the Demon King and the Ghost King are both here, I will say what I want to say. I have something to ask of you this time. I need a batch of spirit stones. I don't know how many you can give me." Miss Mu smiled and said, "The spirit stones have been prepared. Why did Mr. come here in person?" Yu Qianzhou was startled and said, "What? Did you know I was coming to collect spirit stones?" Miss Mu and Yu Yan looked at each other. The former asked doubtfully, when Heli was still here, he had set a rule. Did Mr. not know? "I don't know, what rule?" Lady Mu explained, "The demon realm is divided into 300 territories, and each territory is controlled by a demon and a ghost. Therefore, Healy made a rule that each territory needs to pay 10,000 upper-grade spirit stones every month. At the beginning of every month, the rulers of the 300 territories will send people to deliver the spirit stones to the 1,000 Miles Lake, and Healy will take them all. There is no need for you to go door to door and collect them." "What?" Yu Qianzhou exclaimed. "Each territory only needs to pay 10,000 upper-grade spirit stones every month." He still had some words in his heart. "Of Mr. Are you trying to fool me? Just a single piece of land is already frighteningly large. Only you guys can afford to fork out 10,000 a month." Of the territory of the demon realm was already, but it was 10,000 upper-grade spirit stones every month. It's not inappropriate, it's just that. Yu Qianzhou rubbed his chin and hesitated for a moment before saying, "Isn't it a little too little to pay 10,000 high-grade spirit stones per month for each territory? Mr. Tuov of the rule? In that case, how much do you think is appropriate?" Well. Yu Qianzhou thought to himself. With 300 territories, 10,000 yuan per month was indeed too little. In a year, it would only be a total of 30 million yuan. It was not even as good as the 2 7-star blood orchids that he sold. If it was increased by 100 times, it would be more than 3 billion yuan in a year. That would be a great profit. After thinking for a while, he said, "What do you think? How about 1 million per month from each territory?" "What, 1 million?" Miss Mu and Yu Yan exclaimed in unison, their faces full of disbelief. Yu Qianzhou's face darkened as he snorted coldly, "What? Is 1 million a lot? There are indeed too many. I reckon that most of the territories won't be able to be handed over. Lady Mu shook her head and said with a wry smile, "Sir, you may not know this, but spirit stones are the rarest thing in the demon ghost territory. Just like our territory, it's difficult to gather 1 million upper-grade spirit stones in a year. Sir, you want us to hand over 1 million upper-grade spirit stones every month. It's not that we don't want to, but we can't." Yu Qianchou was stunned and asked suspiciously, "Is the demon ghost territory so poor?" In his impression, the demon ghost territory was not only rich in all kinds of rare spirit grasses, but there should also be a lot of spirit stones. In the past, he not only got a lot of top-grade spirit stones in the demon ghost territory, but he even got some divine-grade spirit stones. He was too lazy to dig up those upper-grade spirit stones. How could a demon king not even have 1 million upper-grade spirit stones every month? Lady Mu smiled bitterly and said, "Compared to the human world, the demon ghost territory is indeed very poor. The same demon cultivators, on the same cultivation level, spend more time in the demon ghost territory than in the human world, and even spend several times more time. Fortunately, the spiritual qi in the demon ghost territory is far more abundant than in the human world." This time, Yu Qianchou was a little depressed. He believed that the two women did not have the courage to lie to him. It seemed that his plan to get rich was ruined. He asked with a little unwillingness, "Could every territory be so poor? Aren't there any rich ones?" That might not be the case. Territories with good luck might discover new mines that have yet to be excavated, but the chances are very small. After all, the demon ghost territory has existed for so many years. Furthermore, the ratio of cultivation is far greater than in the human world. Even if a new mine is excavated, the share is also very large. Therefore, there are very few undiscovered spirit stone mines. Most of the territories are searching for missing spirit stones in some old mines. Lady Mu explained. It seemed like it was purely a coincidence that they found the spirit stone mine back then. Yu Qianchou sat there in silence. Right now, he was very concerned about the tens of millions of upper-grade spirit stones that were swallowed by the Wu clan. After a long time, he said helplessly, "Since that is the case, let's follow the old rules." Looking at the sky outside, it was already slightly bright. He reckoned that another day had passed, and he still had to rush back to farm. There were still a few days before the start of the month, and the spirit stones for the deficient flame mystic fruit couldn't be cut off. It seemed like he had to use his capital to pay for a few more days. Forget it. Even if it was less, there would still be 36 million spirit stones in a year. After deducting the amount that was used up, he could still earn around 30 million spirit stones. He could only comfort himself like this. He stood up listlessly and waved his hand. "That will be all. I still have something to do and have to rush back." He was in a low mood, but he didn't think about it. How many sects could earn 30 million spirit stones in a year even in the human world? He should be content with what he had. However, he was used to seeing a lot of money, and he couldn't lift his spirits with less money. "Mr. Lady Mu walked over and bowed. "I just received a message. A few demon kings and ghost king in the nearby territories heard that Mr. is here and are rushing over at top speed. They wish to pay their respects to Mr. Some of the territories even prepared a greeting gift for Mr. Would Mr. like to wait a little longer?" Yu Qianchou took a glance at her and thought, "Damn it. She was so poor that she couldn't even afford spirit stones. How could she possibly have a greeting gift? What else could the demon domain have besides spirit herbs?" When he thought of spirit herbs, he was slightly taken aback. He reached for the Pill Grandmaster's pill recipe Jade Archive and took out a blank Jade Archive. He spent some time copying the spirit herbs that he didn't have on the Jade Archive and handed it to Lady Mu. "There are some drawings of spirit herbs in here. You can make a few copies and pass them to the other demon kings and ghost king. Tell them to help me collect some when they have time. As for the greeting gifts, keep them for me." Give them to me when the opportunity arises. Lady Mu took the jade archive and asked in surprise, Mister, do you know alchemy? What's so strange about that? Yu Qianzhou waved his hand weakly. I'll take my leave first. He didn't know that almost no one in the demon domain knew alchemy. Otherwise, there wouldn't be so many rare spirit herbs left uncollected in the demon domain. Lady Mu glanced at Yu Yan and bowed. I'm afraid you might run into someone as blind as old Monster Tang. We'll see you off, mister. There's no need. Yu Qianzhou walked out of the hall alone. With his back facing the two women, he waved his hand and said, I'm not in a good mood. If there are any more blind fools, I won't waste my breath on them. I'll kill every one of them I see. Then he unsheathed his long sword and carried him away into the sky. Chapter 304. After returning to Shuntian Island, Yu Qianzhou remembered that he had forgotten to ask where the spirit stones could be obtained at the 1,000-mile lake. There was no need to go back and ask. Although a small silver ball had been secretly placed in Miss Mu's village, with Bai Changchun around, he did not dare to play the trick of suddenly disappearing and reappearing, so he could only wait until that day. In the following days, in addition to taking care of the deficient flame-profound fruit, Yu Qianzhou also paid his respects to Bai Changchun every morning and evening. The old man sat there cross-legged without even opening his eyes. He only let out a soft indicating that he understood. In fact, Bai Changchun did not restrict his freedom at all. As long as he served the deficient flame-profound fruit well, he could play however he wanted and go wherever he wanted. However, he still did not dare to leave the demon domain. After all, he had not agreed to leave the demon domain. The surrounding houses, where He Li used to live, now belonged to him, so he often wandered by Bai Changchun's door, looking for an opportunity to strike up a conversation. However, Bai Changchun was like an old monk in meditation, sitting there without moving. Yu Qianzhou was anxious. Since he had already taken him as his master, he had to get some real things out of the old man's mouth. For example, the old man's cultivation method was what he coveted the most. Just think, more than 2,000 years ago, when the old man had not yet reached the soul formation stage, none of the top masters in the cultivation world could exchange more than 3 moves with him. Furthermore, he had the ability to split a mountain with his sword. Any one of them would be enough for him to show off. Taking a step back, he could also give one of the spiritual treasures of the 4 families that he had seen last time. However, Bai Changchun had been sitting there, and he did not dare to disturb him except for the excuse of paying his respects. At the beginning of the month, he once again went to Lady Mu's mountain stronghold with his sword. When she found out that he came because he didn't know the location of the spirit stones collection, Lady Mu told him the location with a strange expression on her face. Then, she helped him bathe together. He lay in the bath and made a decision. He asked Lady Mu to pass on the message that the place to collect spirit stones would be changed to this mountain stronghold. Miss Mu was naturally happy about this. It was definitely a good thing to be in contact with the disciples of the punishment enforcer. While putting on his clothes, Yu Qianzhou asked, "Didn't you say last time that someone was going to give me a gift? Have you delivered it yet?" Miss Mu, who was naked but was helping him put on his clothes, smiled and said, "They said there's no need to trouble me. When I see you, I'll give it to you personally." "Are they afraid that you'll keep their things?" Yu Qianzhou asked. "That's not it. Even if they wanted me to stop them, they would know that I wouldn't dare to do so." "He probably wants to meet you and express his sincerity," Lady Mu said with a smile. "Problem." Yu Qianzhou snorted. He could guess what those demons and ghosts were thinking. They just wanted to get acquainted with the disciplinary envoy's disciple. After thinking about it, he decided to satisfy them, so he said, "Miss Mu, send a message to those who want to see me. Tell them to wait for me here at the beginning of next month." Lady Mu, who was dressing herself, smiled and said, with your words, my place will be lively. I reckon that the 300 demon kings and the 300 ghost king will all rush here. As he spoke, he suddenly frowned and said, Mister, won't this cause too much of a commotion? What if the torture enforcer is unhappy? Damn it! It's better if he's unhappy. I can't even find a chance to talk to him. It's best if he can find me. Yu Qianzhou's eyes flickered, and he waved his hand and said, It's fine. If there's anything, just push it to me. Just say that I was the one who called for them. Speaking of all the demon kings and ghost king coming here, Yu Qianzhou thought of Yu Ji, who was good at playing tricks. He didn't know if she would still come after her husband died. She probably would. Understood. Lady Mu looked at him meaningfully. If it was the Li He of the past, he would definitely be very careful and would never dare to say something like this. Lady Mu had already sent someone to fetch the spirit stones that Yu Qianzhou wanted from the 1,000 Miles Lake. Yu Qianzhou tossed the spirit stones into his storage pouch and rushed back to Obedient Island. He found that Bai Changchun was still sitting cross-legged with his eyes closed, meditating. He didn't know how long Bai Changchun was going to sit there. After wandering around for a few days, Miao Yi grew impatient, so he gave up on the idea of wandering around Miao Yi's doorstep. He took out a jade archive and ran to the edge of the island to study it. Recorded on it were the orbits of the star atlas of the 4 directions. Since he had nothing better to do, and it wasn't like he could steal it, he might as well see if he could come up with something similar to the star flame fire technique. In the past, he had guessed that the star atlas contained 5 types of elemental magic arts, but he was still groping for the right direction, so he didn't know if it was possible. Bai Changchun didn't even need to open his eyes to know that Yu Qianzhou had been wandering around during this period of time. With his level of cultivation, not even an ant crawling on the island could hide from him. Miao Yi was also curious about Yu Qianzhou's actions. During the day, this kid would wander around blindly after finishing his work. When he had nothing to do, he would catch a few fish and roast them. Occasionally, he would catch some birds and beasts to roast, and would even ask if Miao Yi wanted to eat them. Miao Yi didn't know whether to laugh or cry, so Miao Yi decided to ignore him. Furthermore, the wine in his storage pouch seemed to be inexhaustible, and he used it as water to quench his thirst. At night, as soon as the sky turned dark, Miao Yi would cover his head and sleep soundly, snoring loudly until dawn. Once he got up, he would run to the edge of the lake and make some strange movements with his buttocks in the air. Then, he would strip naked and dive into the water to swim. He would catch a fish for breakfast, and when he was full, he would go to work in the garden of the deficient flame profound fruit. Just like this, Miao Yi had never seen him cultivate. If everyone was like him, then there would be no need for him to cultivate. Miao Yi really didn't know how he was able to reach the late core formation stage at such a young age. Actually, Bai Changchun didn't know that Yu Qianzhou himself didn't want to be idle like this. The key was that ever since he absorbed the azure fire, the core in his dantian seemed to have a spiritual nature, and could refine spiritual qi to cultivate. If he were to sit down and painstakingly cultivate, it would be faster to let nature take its course. In fact, he only needed to take out a spirit stone from time to time and absorb spiritual qi. Since it was already like this, was there still a need for him to sit there and cultivate? In addition, he didn't dare to steal it, so he naturally had nothing better to do. Therefore, in the morning, he would do calisthenics, swim, and make some snacks. Otherwise, Big Brother would be lonely. Which star chart of the 4 directions should he study first? Yu Qianzhou sat by the lake, shaking his head as he pondered. His gaze fell upon the surface of the lake, and he paused for a moment. In his previous life, the 5 elements of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth were located in the north. If his guess was correct, the northern star chart should be related to water. With such a large lake here, it was just the right time to verify his conjecture. Out of boredom, he immediately found a way to pass the time. He immersed his divine sense into the northern star chart recorded in the Jade Archive, and calmed his body and mind as he studied the changing trajectories of the star chart. As he sat there, he lost track of time. The moon rose, the moon set, and the stars sank. In the blink of an eye, it was dawn of the next day, yet he was still sitting there in the same position. Usually, he would work in the morning, but even when the sun was high in the sky, he was still sitting there with his eyes closed, deep in thought. He had already entered a certain state. This strange phenomenon immediately attracted Bai Changchun's attention. Sitting cross-legged in the room, Bai Changchun finally opened his eyes, revealing an expression of disbelief. He abruptly disappeared from where he was, and soundlessly reappeared in front of Yu Qianqiu. His eyes shone brightly as he sized him up. With his eyes closed, Yu Qianqiu's expression kept changing. Sometimes, he would smile foolishly like a child, sometimes, he would furrow his brows in deep thought, and sometimes, his brows would relax and he would nod slightly, as if he had understood something. Bai Changchun's expression was extremely shocked. He had cultivated for more than 2,000 years, and his knowledge was vast. The Yu Qianqiu in front of him had obviously comprehended something and entered a state of enlightenment. For cultivators, this was definitely something that could only be encountered by chance. Once they comprehended it, they would benefit for the rest of their lives. Normally, cultivators with low comprehension would find it very difficult to enter this state. Usually, only cultivators with extremely high talent would be able to enter this state. For example, he himself was considered one of the most talented cultivators in the same generation. When he broke through to the soul formation stage at the age of 300, he entered a state of enlightenment. After another 300 years, he broke through to the middle stage from the early stage of soul formation, and after another 500 years, this state of enlightenment appeared again, helping him break through to the late stage of soul formation. However, after reaching the late stage of soul formation, after more than 1,000 years, this state of enlightenment that he yearned for never appeared again. As his lifespan was nearing its end, he had no choice but to search for external methods. He wanted to take the risk of entering the Eastern Holy Land to find a method to break through and ascend. He broke through to the soul formation stage at the age of 300, and reached the middle stage at the age of 600. In total, it took him 1,100 years to reach the late stage of soul formation. Among his peers, his talent was definitely at the top of the best. At the same time, he understood that this was inseparable from his bitter cultivation. However, this young man in front of him, who was always fooling around and idling around, had actually entered a state of enlightenment. His talent was already considered high, but he only had this opportunity when he was 300 years old. But how old was this kid? Was it talent or the will of the heavens? How was this possible? He had never heard of it before. Bai Changchun shook his head and smiled bitterly. His gaze fell on the Jade Archive in Yu Qianqiu's hand. He thought to himself, could it be that there's something strange about this Jade Archive? He raised his hand, wanting to take it for a closer look. However, just as he raised his hand, he put it down again and shook his head slightly. If it had nothing to do with this Jade Archive, he would definitely wake Yu Qianqiu up from this state of enlightenment if he took the Jade Archive. He might even ruin the one and only opportunity in his life. It was difficult to seek for oneself, but it was also impossible to destroy others. This was the will of the heavens. This was the will of the heavens. He could not go against the will of the heavens. Bai Changchun raised his head to look at the horizon and sighed softly. He thought of the phrase he often said, if the heavens have feelings. However, it had been a long time since the heavens' favor had descended upon him. Now, it had descended upon the disciple he had accepted. Fate, was this the will of the heavens? Chapter 305. Bai Changchun's gaze paused on the blazing sun. Only then did he remember that this kid was in a meditative state and he didn't know when he would wake up. He probably wouldn't think of the deficient flame profound fruit for a while. It seemed like he could only do it for him. After idling around for so long, it was rare for him to have this kind of luck after calming down. Bai Changchun glanced at Yu Qianzhou and shook his head with a wry smile. His figure flashed and appeared in the garden where the deficient flame profound fruit was planted. He took out some spirit stones from his storage bag. Yu Qianzhou didn't know that his current state was something that could only be found by chance. Even Bai Changchun was envious of this state. For him, as long as he was willing to calm down, this state should appear at any time. It was the same when he comprehended the star flame fire technique last time. In fact, as Bai Changchun thought, there might be some heavens will involved, or it could be luck. Bai Suzhen and Yu Qianzhou didn't know the name of the golden bead. If Bai Changchun knew about its mysterious effects, he would be able to tell its origin. This thing was the star bead that caused the ancient cultivation world war. In fact, it wasn't just the cultivation world. As the punishment envoy of the demon ghost domain, Bai Changchun also knew other unknown secrets. In the ancient cultivation world war, even many experts from the immortal world risked being punished by the immortals. They braved the danger of never being reincarnated and never being reincarnated to come to the human world to fight over this star bead. At that time, this world was a world where humans, demons, and ghosts coexisted. The three creatures abided by their rules and generally wouldn't openly offend each other. They each cultivated their own way. When the time came, you became your immortal, and I became my immortal. In the end, a group of strong people turned the world upside down for this bead. The rules that humans, demons, and ghosts abided by became **t. In short, the duel between the higher-ups implicated the lower-ups. The lower-ups didn't know what the higher-ups were doing, but they also followed and caused chaos in the world. Demons and ghosts ran amok everywhere, and the human bodies that didn't cultivate suffered. It was at this time that an amazing person appeared and tricked a group of people who liked to fight to a desolate continent in the east. He set up some heaven and earth great array and trapped the group of troublemaking hooligans. That place was now the **t Eastern Holy Land. However, because of this, the powerful man was severely injured by a group of hooligans. Before he died, the powerful man once again showed his power and forced most of the demons and ghosts to another barren land. Because he was about to die, he did not have the ability to cast a formation again, so he used his spiritual treasure to casually play around. When there was no tiger in the mountain, the monkey would act as the king. The awesome man chose the remaining expert who was about the same level as him to be the torturer, meaning that if there was a ghost or a demon that was disobedient, he would punish him. This was the origin of the domain of demons and ghosts, so Bai Changchun, as a torture envoy, knew that the golden pearl was called the star pearl. The misty universe existed eternally. The primordial bead was bestowed by the primordial chaos. There was a legend passed down from generation to generation among the torturers of the domain of demons and ghosts. It was said that those who could obtain and control the star pearl could become a god who dominated a region. In other words, it was an existence that was more advanced than immortals. It was the kind of existence that no one could restrain except for the primordial chaos. Therefore, such an awesome thing naturally made the experts in the immortal world unable to restrain themselves. So, they ran to the human world to play hooligans. Unfortunately, a large group of people was defeated by an awesome person. If Yu Qianzhou knew that he had such a thing in his hands, he would definitely go crazy with joy. Fortunately, he did not know. However, he was not a fool. Even if he did not know, he would have regarded the golden pearl as his family treasure. Except for Bai Suzhen who already knew, it would be difficult for others to ask him even if they beat him to death. He could feel the benefits of the golden pearl more and more, so he decided to keep it to himself until he was old. In this way, it also explained why Yu Qianzhou could enter the state that even Bai Changchun envied so easily. Originally, with the star pearl in his body, comprehending the orbit of the stars, compared to others, was like looking for something in his own home. It was much easier than others. Yu Qianzhou, whose consciousness was immersed in the Jade Archive, didn't know how much time had passed. His mind was filled with the changing orbit of the stars. In order to transform it into a cultivation technique, he racked his brains. Because he had the experience of comprehending the star flame fire technique by chance, the orbit of the countless stars in the constellation diagram was slowly merging and straightening out. Bai Changchun had just finished replenishing the spirit stones for the star flame profound fruit. His eyes suddenly flashed and he teleported to Yu Qianzhou's side. He saw that Yu Qianzhou, who was originally sitting casually, had already sat cross-legged in a well-behaved manner. His face had a gratified smile, and an expression of understanding. He had comprehended it. It had only been a little more than a day. Bai Changchun was an experienced person. He could tell at a glance. His expression twitched a little, and at the same time, he could tell that Yu Qianzhou was still in a state that had yet to awaken. Everything he was doing now was like a dream. Bai Changchun's gaze fell on the Jade Archive that had fallen to the ground. He raised his hand and sucked it into his palm. He imbued his consciousness to examine it, and found that it was filled with a mess of densely packed dots of light. Who knew what they were? However, Bai Changchun's intuition told him that Yu Qianzhou's entry into the realm might have something to do with this item. Thus, he patiently examined it, hoping to discover something. One was sitting, the other was standing. Unknowingly, another day had passed like this. The sky brightened once again. Bai Changchun slowly opened his eyes and shook his head with a bitter smile. He had pried into someone else's privacy without their permission. Based on his own status, he shouldn't have done so, even though this person was his disciple. Unfortunately, even though he was thick-skinned enough to do so, he still couldn't see through it. There were countless dots of light inside, and he really couldn't figure out what they were. Actually, it wasn't just him. Even if the gods were here, they wouldn't be able to understand what they were. These were the markings of the stars that Yu Qianzhou had memorized in a hurry. To be more precise, it should be the markings of the 5 directions constellations, with the southern one missing. It was an incomplete item to begin with, and Yu Qianzhou had made it for Bai Changchun to see. It was like a person's handwriting. If the handwriting was too sloppy, it would be difficult for others to understand it. Only the person who wrote it would be able to understand it. Even the gods wouldn't be able to understand such an unfathomable thing recorded in the Jade Archive, let alone by Changchun, even though he had a profound cultivation base. Regretfully, Bai Changchun quietly placed the Jade Archive back in its original spot. He had done something shameful, and thought to himself, "I'll make it up to you in the future." Just as he was about to leave, he suddenly sensed something amiss with his spiritual sense. He looked around but couldn't find anything. He immediately released his divine sense to investigate. He saw that the surface of the lake that Yu Qianzhou was facing was densely packed with tiny, crystalline dots that were hard to see with the naked eye. Those dots of light were like happy little fairies, circling around Yu Qianzhou's body and jumping around cheerfully. Finally, they burrowed into Yu Qianzhou's pores. What are these things? Could it be that an external evil has invaded his body? Bai Changchun was shocked. He still had many questions for this disciple of his, and he couldn't afford for anything to happen to him at this moment. He immediately raised his hand with a solemn expression, intending to use his profound cultivation base to chase these tiny, unknown things away. However, in the end, he didn't make a move. He was stopped by the comfortable expression on Yu Qianzhou's face. An external evil invading one's body should be painful, not comfortable. With his rich experience, Bai Changchun didn't make a rash decision. Instead, he carefully stood guard for Yu Qianzhou. If he found anything amiss, he would immediately lend a helping hand. Standing next to Yu Qianzhou, he could feel the air getting more and more humid. It was so humid that he could squeeze water out of it. A faintly discernible, illusory, and transparent substance began to wrap around Yu Qianzhou, until it turned into a watery liquid, clear and transparent. Bai Changchun heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed that he had been overthinking things. This kid seemed to have cultivated some kind of mysterious technique. Looking at the blazing sun in the sky, Bai Changchun smiled bitterly once more. He teleported to the deficient flame profound fruits garden. Chapter 306. Water Elements. The little elves happily flowed into his meridians. A smile appeared on Yu Qianzhou's face. It seemed like his guess about the 5-direction star map was right. There were indeed 5 elemental spells of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth. After mastering the spell, Yu Qianzhou didn't have any misgivings and placed the water elements into the cultivation center, the Dantian. Once the little fellows entered the Dantian, they were immediately attracted to the core formation like the fire elements. They all surged towards the core formation, one after another, and for some unknown reason. When the water element no longer entered his Dantian and began to surge toward his limbs and bones, Yu Qianzhou's body trembled. It was as if he was extremely thirsty and suddenly drank cool spring water. He was so comfortable that he let out a moan. Then, he quickly began to circulate the water art. Bai Changchun, who was standing not far away, watched the strange scene in front of him. He saw that Yu Qianzhou was surrounded by a huge transparent ball of water. His whole body had left the ground and was floating in the middle of the ball of water. Just when Yu Qianzhou let out a moan, countless tiny shiny objects that were hard to see with the naked eye rose from the 1,000-mile lake and rushed towards him. The ball of water with a diameter of about 2 meters began to expand. When the ball of water expanded to about 10 meters in diameter, it stopped. Bai Changchun's expression was serious. This was already the 10th day since Yu Qianzhou entered the qi refining realm. The longer he stayed in the qi refining realm, the more benefits he would get. Every time he entered the qi refining realm, he would stay in the qi refining realm for 10 days at most. If Yu Qianzhou could stay in the qi refining realm for more than 10 days, then without a doubt, Yu Qianzhou's talent was higher than his. People who had reached his level of cultivation all knew that the length of time one stayed in the qi refining realm was related to the time one stayed in the qi refining realm. Usually, the longer one stayed in the qi refining realm, the longer one stayed in the qi refining realm. Otherwise, the shorter the time one stayed in the qi refining realm. This was talent. When the water element was injected into every cell in his body, Yu Qianzhou was initially worried that water and fire would not be compatible because his body stored the fire element of the green fire. Who knew that once the water element entered his body, the fire element in every cell would start to compress and automatically give up half of the space. Water and fire would coexist in a line and would not interfere with each other. Just as he was about to call it a day, the core in his Dantian suddenly began to move. From the initial slow rotation, it gradually turned into a rapid rotation. The true essence in his Dantian was crazily absorbed. The true essence in his Dantian was sucked dry, and it began to spread to the true essence outside his Dantian. His Dantian was like a sewer, and all the true essence in his body was sucked in. There was only one reason, and that was to support the absorption of the core. F*ck me. How could this be? Yu Qianzhou panicked a little. He had never heard of such a thing. If this continued, he would be sucked dry. He quickly grabbed a handful of spirit stones with both hands and absorbed the spiritual energy into his body. Bai Changchun naturally noticed Huang Xiaolong's abnormality. Huang Xiaolong was still in the process of advancing, but he could still take out spirit stones to absorb spiritual energy. Strange. But at this moment, Yu Qianzhou was not feeling strange, but afraid. The true essence in his body was almost sucked dry, and the core did not even let go of the spiritual energy in his Dantian, crazily rotating and absorbing it. 2 more handfuls of spirit stones, not enough. Then 2 more handfuls, still not enough. Huang Xiaolong grabbed handfuls of spirit stones, crazily absorbing the spiritual energy into his body. Unfortunately, the core was like a bottomless pit, not rejecting anything. Whether it was true essence or spiritual energy, as long as it was to its liking, it would absorb it all. F***CK. Yu Qianzhou wished he could take out the black divine grade spirit stone and absorb it, but his mind was still clear. They were still on the obedient island, who knew what kind of consequences it would bring if he took out such a heaven-defying treasure. Bai Changchun's eyes shone brightly as he stared at Yu Qianzhou. The speed at which he was absorbing spiritual energy was getting faster and faster. In the end, Bai Changchun was able to grab a handful of spirit stones in each hand, like a whale drinking water. 2 handfuls of spirit stones were sucked dry in the blink of an eye, then tossed away. Another 2 handfuls, more and more spirit stones appeared in Bai Changchun's hands, to the point that they were about to fall off. 10,000 high-grade spirit stones, 20,000, 30,000, 100,000, 200,000. Bai Changchun was dumbfounded. How could someone absorb spirit stones at such a crazy speed? Even with his cultivation, he could only absorb 10,000 high-grade spirit stones at a time, then slowly refine them. It was impossible for him to absorb spirit stones endlessly. How could his body store so much spiritual energy without refining it? Not to mention, he no longer needed to absorb spirit stones to increase his cultivation. Crazy. 2 handfuls of over 100 high-grade spirit stones were sucked dry in 2 seconds. In 1 minute, he had absorbed over 3,000 high-grade spirit stones. In 2 hours, that was close to 200,000 high-grade spirit stones. Bai Changchun was so shocked that he nearly forgot to replenish the deficient flame-profound fruit. 2 days later, Yu Qianzhou finally stopped, panting heavily. In fact, Bai Changchun was more exhausted than Yu Qianzhou. In 2 days, Bai Changchun estimated that he had absorbed more than 10 million high-grade spirit stones in one go. It was truly shocking and unbelievable. Fortunately, Yu Qianzhou was floating in the air, and below him was the foot of the obedient island that extended all the way to the 1,000 Miles Lake. Otherwise, he would have been drowned by the spirit stones. Damn it! It finally stopped. What the hell is this? Making this daddy so nervous, this daddy almost died of exhaustion. Yu Qianzhou's little heart was thumping wildly. The haunted core in his dantian finally stopped. At this time, the core had already turned golden. From its high-speed rotation, it gradually slowed down until it finally stopped. However, Yu Qianzhou felt as if there was another him inside, ready to break out of the shell. Could it be that he was going to break through to the nascent soul stage? That's not right. How could it be so fast? Also, he had never heard of anyone absorbing so many spirit stones to break through to the nascent soul stage. Yu Qianzhou was a little confused. He did not even calculate how many spirit stones he had absorbed. Suddenly, there was a movement in his dantian, which immediately attracted his attention. A crack slowly appeared on the golden core suspended in his dantian. As time passed, the crack became bigger and bigger. After a long time, the golden core finally cracked open. A few pieces of the golden shell fell off and turned into a golden mist. In an instant, the entire dantian was filled with golden mist. Within the golden mist, a baby with complete facial features and 4 limbs could be faintly seen. As the mist floated, the baby's eyes were tightly closed. He was quietly floating in the dantian with his legs crossed. Suddenly, the baby's delicate nose slightly moved. With a fierce breath, the golden mist that was floating in the surroundings was immediately sucked into the baby's body. He broke through. He really broke through to the nascent soul stage. Damn it! Yu Qianzhou could not say whether he was happy or not. He could only forcefully control his emotions. He carefully looked at the baby. He could clearly see that the baby's facial features were somewhat similar to his own. The baby had small arms and legs, and was strong and lovable. Suddenly, the baby sneezed fiercely, and two shiny little balls came out of his nostrils. One was red, and the other was black. What the hell is this? He had never heard of such a thing when breaking through to the nascent soul stage. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He released his divine sense to touch it. After a little sensing, he immediately understood what was going on. The red one was actually a fire elemental crystal, and the black one was a water elemental crystal. At this moment, the baby who was sitting cross-legged in meditation yawned again. He saw that the spiritual energy in his dantian had been sucked into it. After a long time, he breathed out. However, when he breathed out the spiritual energy, it had already turned into a tiny wisp of true essence. Just like that, the little guy began his first breath. The spiritual energy was inhaled, and the true essence was exhaled. And just as he began to breathe, the red fire elemental crystal and the black water elemental crystal, one on the left and one on the right, began to slowly revolve around him. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.